across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
2 minutes past 10, Talk in the afternoon. Lovely to meet you in the morning. What time is it? Lovely. What a start. Oh, my goodness. 10:02. It is mid-morning. Mark Dolan in for the wonderful Julia Hartley-Brewer. And have we got a packed show for you today? Let me tell you, we're going to talk about the economy. Long-term unemployment hits a decade high with open borders, sky-high energy and the highest youth unemployment in Europe. Is this the worst government in 100 years? Meanwhile, some good news on this sunny Monday. Is a peace deal in the offing in the Middle East? And has Donald Trump been proved right in his efforts to disarm the Iranian regime? Also this morning, we're going to talk about the right being very, very split. Look at Makerfield, and of course it's a battle between Reform and Labour, but it would appear that support for Restore, Rupert Lowe's insurgent party of the right, may well gift Andy Burnham a return to the House of Commons. Do the right need to unite? And what about this? The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has described a case in which 3 teenage boys were spared custodial sentences over the rape of 2 girls as appalling. A simple question this morning: is British justice dead? And what about the BBC, who are now using bailiffs to get money out of cash-strapped Brits? Is it time to get rid of the hated TV tax? Now, my phone number is 03444991000. Kieran is taking your calls. The brilliant Mark Gale is our engineer today. Ted's producing and directing our TV output, Nahar. So you can hear the show on DAB+, in-app and online. But you can also watch us. Just head to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. If you do that, you will see the elegantly dressed and always wise Rafe Hadel-Manku, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, broadcaster and journalist. Good morning.
Happy Bank Holiday Monday.
I had to recalibrate and work out what time of the day it is. I blame the heat.
Yes, I know. It's a scorcher, as one of the sister publications of this building used to like to tell everybody. But we here at the news building have a glorious view over the river with the domes and towers of the city shining and glistening. So actually, I don't mind being here today.
Well, it's lovely to have you in the studio. And the BBC are now using bailiffs to get money out of cash-strapped Brits. Is it time to axe this hated TV tax?
Yes, you know, for years I was one of the only people on the Conservative right to actually defend the need to have something like the BBC funded by the state in a reduced form, because I said, you know, the BBC cover royal events, state events, national events, things that actually bring the nation together. It's the only organisation in the world, media-wise, which provides that useful way for the nation to actually share in these shared moments. But increasingly, of course, they've lost the boat race. They no longer have the Grand National. Their royal events, you could say, have deteriorated with vox pops and so forth. So increasingly, they don't serve even that function any longer. I want a BBC, ideally, that covers things nobody else covers. You know, the brass bands of the north of England. All those things that, you know, aren't commercially viable have an important part to play in British life and educating the country about some of our wonderful history and traditions and so forth. But they have long ceased to do that. Now they denigrate our culture as well. So even me, who has actually defended it, now thinks the licence fee is indefensible, particularly, of course, when we live in an era now where there are so many taxes, and we speak about things like the winter fuel allowance, U-turn and so forth. I would say this actually has to be another way in which you help the pensioners and the elderly, because they are the only ones left who watch the BBC, are people who are pensioners, and they're not being served by it, because pensioners are the least woke people in the country, and yet they are forced to sit through their favourite soap operas that used to be so much fun, like Coronation Street, or, well, that's on ITV, isn't it? But EastEnders. I remember after the news at 1 o'clock, there used to be Doctors, which I used to watch because it ran off after the news, and suddenly everybody on there was disabled, was a lesbian, was going through some sort of moral crisis about the far right, and I thought, is this the demographic you're trying to appeal to after they've had their lunch on a Monday afternoon?
I know, and this obsession with young presenters. There's this idea that if you're going to get young viewers and listeners, you need young talent. I don't think it's true. Look at Ken Bruce. He had the biggest radio show, not just in the UK, but the whole of Europe, and they ran his contract down. Steve Wright in the afternoon died of a broken heart because of his treatment by the BBC, and it shows a complete contempt for the audience getting rid of these legends.
It's an absolute contempt, and it's a failure to actually KYC, know your client, know exactly what the audience want. You know, the customer is always right.
I wondered where you were going with KYC.
Not KYJ.
I thought that was an emollient.
That wasn't KYJ.
Can I just straighten you out here? I know we've had a drink, but it's a family show, and I don't know why you've had to bring up KY ointment, but that's fine. Good.
But the issue is once we get around your skin issues, the broader point, of course, we had the issue of sport. What was that sports match which has gone now, fronted by some black lady? They're getting rid of it on the BBC.
Yes, it's called. It's a big sports show, and it's been axed after about 30 or 40 years.
And they couldn't explain. They couldn't understand all those people being paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a year at the BBC. Couldn't realise perhaps it was the change of focus. Football had lost its focus on that show. They had failed to connect with their demographic. And let's be honest, a lot of football spectators do believe that, you know, they enjoy seeing a man talk about this stuff, I'm afraid to say. Can I say that? Jimmy Hill, all those characters, Des Lynam, that's as far back as I go. I haven't watched anything since then. But people, you know, that's the reality. That's one of the reasons that you're seeing viewing figures plummet, not just at the BBC, but elsewhere.
Most definitely. And I think that I just wonder whether there are parallels with the BBC and, for example, the Labour Party, two organisations that have abandoned their base, which is ordinary working people.
Well, that's precisely what's happened. I mean, what's happened with the Labour Party is quite simply they have been overtaken. They all, if you look at the 1970s Labour front benches, they were filled with people who had got their hands dirty in their life. Yeah. Literally, you know, now they climb the greasy pole and manage to keep their hands clean. Back then, they were down in the mines, down in the pits. These were former trade union leaders. These were people who had served in the Second World War alongside, you know, everybody who had come from all strata of society. Now we've got people who've gone to public school, or they've gone straight to Oxford and Cambridge. They've all studied PPE. They've all become spads after that. We have a political class that have no business experience, no trade union experience. They have never been in the real world. And then they wonder why, of course, they're so disconnected from the real working class peoples they're supposed to represent, when, of course, they're much happier in the champagne socialism of Islington.
Well, that's right. They're in the metropolitan progressive elite, aren't they? Which is all about open borders, suicidal empathy, net zero, a welfare culture which is rewarding, you know, no activity. That's the issue. I used
to know the daughter of the late great Malcolm Muggeridge, and
great broadcaster and cultural commentator,
a great cultural commentator and broadcaster,
nearly as good as you.
And he had an aunt who was a dyed-in-the-wool communist. Now this family was very aristocratic and privileged. And today's a bank holiday. Every Labour Day bank holiday on May the 1st, she would send her butler up onto the roof to raise the red flag. Now I can sort of see people like Jeremy Corbyn's lot, Keir Starmer doing something similar to that as they have their smashed avocado. Exactly. They're now using the politics of woke. What happened really was they've realised that the working class of this country are small c conservatives. They're patriots. Those are the people who voted for Brexit. In America, those are the working classes who voted for Trump. And they realise they're not going to be the foot soldiers of our socialist revolution because they've rejected all of this. So we have to use identity politics. We have to use the politics of division to do this. That's one of the reasons you could say they flooded the nation with immigrants as well, because you need a new demographic to have this victimhood grievance culture and to support this narrative. And that's why, of course, they're focusing on women, on homosexuals, on the disabled, on ethnic minorities. These are the ways. And look, many people have written about this. It's called The Long March Through the Institutions. We've got a book out on it by Mark Sidwell, one of my colleagues at the New Culture Forum, about how basically minorities have become the foot soldiers for the left, as the working class used to be. But the working class failed the Labour movement.
And what's going to be interesting is how the minorities, ethnic Brits, will likely abandon the Labour project too, in favour of the Greens, a potential independent candidate, and, surprise, surprise, Reform UK.
Yeah, precisely. Well, this is what happens.
That coalition, the ethnic coalition, is now splintered, isn't it?
And this is what happens when you have such short-term thinking. Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson, as Peter Mandelson said, we sent out search parties looking for immigrants to come to this country. Why? Andrew Neither, speechwriter to the Labour immigration minister, said, we want to rub the right's nose in diversity. And by flooding the nation with a new demographic who tend to vote, at that point, overwhelmingly for the Labour Party, 80% of ethnic minorities voted for the Labour Party, they thought, oh, in decades to come, we're going to have an inbuilt majority. We're going to have Labour governments into the future. And of course, if you look at places like London, it's a plan that seems to have worked. But they didn't think that eventually they wouldn't need the Labour Party. They would outgrow the purpose of the Labour Party. And that's why now you're seeing the rise of the Greens, for example. And in fact, I spoke to a Muslim commentator who said there's now a schism in the Islamic community. The older Muslim population are still loyal to the Labour Party as they have been for decades, and they're voting there. But it's the younger and more radically Islamist element of the Muslim demographic that are voting for the Green Party. Why? You'll remember at the last election, everyone was talking about the independent Muslim vote, that's where they were going to park their votes. Well, what they realised was there aren't enough Muslims yet for that to carry them to much success. So they need to ally with the useful idiots, the Polenzi Duraki, as the Soviets used to call the useful idiots on the left during the Cold War. We need to ally with those people again, because if we combine the left white vote with our vote, we can get to power. So they're using the Green Party as a Trojan horse, which of course explains why you have radically conservative Muslims voting for a party run by a gay Jew. There's obviously a disconnect there, but they know full well what's going on. And what's remarkable yet again is, are the leftists in the Green Party naive to all this, or are they willfully blind and so desperate for power that they'll ally with the devil?
Might be the latter. Now, do you remember a guy called Sir Keir Starmer, I think is how you pronounce his name?
Does he have ginger hair? I can't remember. Oh, no, that's another one, isn't it?
Something
Angela
like
Rayner, I think.
A billionaire paid for his glasses. Well, he's in the news, and he's talking about this awful miscarriage of justice. He's described a case in which 3 teenage boys were spared custodial sentences over the rape of 2 girls as appalling. Now, that's fine. It's the usual hand-wringing and pearl-clutching and warm words from the Prime Minister. But this verdict demonstrates just how woke our judiciary are, doesn't it? Do you think that British justice is now in crisis?
It is completely in crisis. I'd say it's in free fall. And of course, the public are losing their trust in the judiciary. And, you know, so many of our institutions have been eroded in recent years. The judiciary is one of the things that made Britain stand tall globally. British justice was the gold standard against which other countries were measured. It's no longer the case. Quite clearly, we have two-tier justice in so many areas. But we also, of course, have examples now where actually the more thought is given to the perpetrator of these crimes than to the victim.
And that is born out of woke progressive ideology, isn't it?
It's completely born out of... So if you remember, when we were young, we had a very right-wing judiciary, and I was always reading things in the paper about some elderly judge who was telling a woman it was her fault for having a short miniskirt.
Yes,
that she was sexually assaulted. Well, my God, have we overcorrected for that now? Now we've gone to the other extreme where you get this sort of rubbish coming out. Why can't we have balance in any of this? And I'm afraid what's happened is, because we have now essentially promoted quotas over talent and meritocracy in the judiciary as we have elsewhere, what you have are a lot of activists who have been basically put into a lot of these places. We see the same thing with immigration tribunals and immigration judges. Many of them have been actual activists for refugees in their previous life, and they've put themselves forward for these sorts of roles. So I'm afraid it's a much wider issue than just this case, unfortunately. And also we've had judges openly celebrating things like the defeat of the Rwanda scheme by the Conservative government. Independent judges on social media celebrating the government being defeated. Now, I believe in the independence of the judiciary, that's sacrosanct, but when there's clear evidence of activism like that, I think judges should be fired. And I think we need to take the appointment of judges away from the Appointments Commission and back to the Lord Chancellor.
And that's why we need to preserve jury trials, because that prevents activist judges from making wrong verdicts.
Yes, and of course we've had a full-scale assault on the jury system, which one of our most ancient liberties, dating back 800 years to Magna Carta.
Yeah.
With Calamity Lammy, David Mastermind Lammy, deciding essentially that we can
I've started, so I'll finish.
But there are so many courts in this country where they actually don't have enough sitting days, and rather than increase the sitting days and increase the numbers of magistrates, it's far better apparently to do away with jury trials. Now, let's caveat that though, because then of course you have other cases. We don't know what happened in the Manchester airport case. We can't speculate on that, but it was the case that jury didn't reach a verdict on that, whereas of course we can look at the video, make up our own mind.
Yeah.
But is it the case that there are juries in this country now, separate from that, where actually you have ethnic disparities on those juries, which means that people aren't basically being judged by a jury of their peers? We have increasing evidence from sociologists and criminologists that juries tend to favour their own ethnicity group over other ethnicity groups. We famously saw that in America with the O.J. Simpson trial. Everyone who was black in America seemingly celebrated when he got off. Everybody who was not black thought he was guilty of that crime. And we have evidence of that. It's similar here in this country, even with white communities, although they tend to be less biased than other communities, but there's still in-group preference there too. So is it the case actually that you can't get a good jury trial as well? So we could be between a rock and a hard place. We can't trust the judges. Increasingly, we have to question the juries, perhaps, in their makeup. Does that mean we have to have some sort of quota system on juries?
What a mess.
And ethnic makeup. Who knows? It's a complicated story for this time in the morning.
If you can't, I like it and I welcome it. If you can't trust the jury trial system because of the failed experiment of multiculturalism, it lands us in a very dark place, doesn't it?
Yes, it's very difficult to see the way out of it unless you essentially replicate society to the percentage within each jury, but that doesn't suit
But the
anybody.
progressive left have encouraged a tribal society.
They have...
By design, Rafe.
Yeah, they have imported by design.
And telling these people, not only do you not have to integrate, it's a virtue if you don't.
Well, I always remember Peter Hitchens saying, now Peter Hitchens, of course, now famously a very conservative spokesman and writer, but of course he was an out-and-out communist. He was a Trotskyist when he was young, and he said, we wanted mass immigration not because we loved immigrants, but because we hated Britain.
Wow, what a line. Well, a minister has broken down in tears on live TV in the light of this awful verdict. Schoolgirl raped by 2 teen boys, says the decision to spare them jail was like a rock straight in my face. This ought to be a wake-up moment for British justice.
Yes, and I'm glad that she's shown some emotion over this, because I think we all feel like crying, hearing the terrible things that happen to these young girls, and of course the judge reacting as if this was somehow a youthful discretion. And he actually complimented the boys in court, saying that they had behaved so well in court. I mean, how must you feel if you were the victim to see that sort of, you know, how insulting and offensive is that? So it's good that we see some tears from him too. But tears aren't enough. We don't want to have tears from our ministers. We want to have action. What are they going to do about it? And actually, I would hope that this chap, Darren Jones, has as many tears for all of the victims of the quadrupling of rape and sexual assault over the last 10 years when we've seen mass immigration to this country. Remember, he was the one who said that the boats coming over the channel weren't full of young men, they were filled with women and children, and then had to correct what he said. Yeah. And I'm afraid we know how much more likely many of those people are to commit rape and sexual assault. Afghanis 22 times more likely to commit rape and sexual assault. I hope he's crying tears over all those victims, which were completely unnecessary, because those people should never have been in the country.
Well said. What a wonderful treat to have Rafe Hadel-Manku with us live in the studio. The BBC are now using bailiffs to get money out of cash-strapped Brits. Is it time to get rid of the hated TV tax? Do you still watch the BBC? 0344 499 1000. Reform UK are going to get rid of income tax on overtime hours worked if they achieve power. Is Nigel Farage the new working class hero? 10:20, this is Talk.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits. That's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning, 10:22. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. Happy Bank Holiday Monday, one and all. Andrew has messaged the show. On the TV licence, he says, the BBC intransigence over the TV licence reminds me of the radio licence. Because of the invention of the transistor, it became impossible to track the radios all the kids were holding. Therefore, attack the pirate radio stations. That didn't go well either. If you're just joining us, the BBC are now using bailiffs to get money out of cash-strapped Brits who don't pay the licence fee. I think it's quite shocking. I think it's deeply, deeply immoral. What about this from Jane? Good morning, Marky Mark. A breath of fresh air coming from Rafe, a man with common sense. Great show. Well, the reason why Rafe is so good is because of the KYC ointment that he bathes himself in whenever he comes on Talk. Listen, let's get to some other stories. Migrants scramble for British citizenship ahead of crackdown. Migrants are rushing to apply for British citizenship in record numbers to avoid future restrictions on settlement rights planned by the Labour government. More than 312,000 refugees, migrant workers and their dependents applied for citizenship in the year to March, the highest number on record and double the rate of 8 years ago. This demonstrates, doesn't it, Rafe Hadel-Manku, why we need to crack down on our open borders policy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the worst situations you could possibly imagine, to have such large numbers of people able to become citizens in this country. The Boris wave was the greatest influx of people to this country in 1,000 years. Between 2021 and 2024, we had 4.8 million people came to this country. 3.6 million of them were from Africa and Asia. And as we know from previous research by the OBR and others, they are a net cost to this country from the moment they set foot on British territory, particularly when you consider their dependents as well. What we need to do, of course, is not only double the number of years you need to live in this country to have citizenship. We need to treble it. We need to, I would say, 15 years living in this country before you qualify for citizenship. And crucially, benefits must only be accrued by people who have citizenship. Citizenship must bring benefits. That should be the actual phrasing of all of this, because that's going to be the deterrent. Because as it currently stands, after just 5 years, you're entitled to social housing, you're entitled to everything on the NHS, you're entitled to benefits and everything else. And so we have this giant Ponzi scheme just waiting to, and there's some forecasts saying, this could cost potentially, hundreds of billions of pounds over the next few years. We are broke, our infrastructure can't take it, but also just think about the cultural and social costs, because too much we discuss actually how the NHS and our schools and hospitals and others can cope with all of this. The reality is, of course, we as a people can't change any longer. We've just had, the talk about the net migration figures, 171 or 141,000 a year. Ignore that. That's political spin. The real number is the gross migration figures.
Correct.
800,000 people have come into this country. 600 and something have left this country. And I'm afraid the people who are leaving are the brightest and the best. British people and Europeans going elsewhere in Europe, going to Canada, America, Australia, and we're left with low-skilled, low-earning income earners. For example, of the 3.6 million visas granted in this country in recent years, 0.8% only were doctors, 0.6% only were scientists. We know that by the time they get to retirement age, they will have cost £150,000 each. If they live to 80, they will have cost £464,000 each. We cannot afford this. It's a disaster. People say Shabana Mahmood is tough. Going to 10 years is fine, but there are still routes for asylum seekers and others to fast-track that 10-year route. And even under these allegedly draconian rules that the backbench Labour MPs are appalled about, even under this system, we're going to get 1.2 million people coming here with citizenship, who are already here getting citizenship in the next few years. Forget that. No citizenship. Get rid of it in leave to remain, and have citizenship after 5 years, 15 years.
If Reform UK win the election, is it going to be difficult to reverse indefinite leave to remain?
Well, it depends what you mean by reverse. If you mean to stop it, no, it won't be difficult to stop
Revoke
it.
it.
To revoke it from those who've already been here, I say go for it. The higher you aim, the closer you'll get to that target. Let's try and see it. If you have indefinite leave to remain, and you can show evidence that you've been a constructive person in society, you've contributed to the economy, you speak English fluency, you have evidence of integration into British society, then we can be more amenable.
It's amazing that we ever had that policy, the idea that we would give someone a citizenship blank check. It's quite mind-boggling.
It's common sense, because people are quite right to question, does holding a British passport alone mean that you're British? Well, yes, legally, if you have one of those passports, you are British. But by what other test are you actually British? Can you show that you actually understand British culture, that you're integrated, that you interact with people from different cultures? We know, many people live in segregated communities now. We're fast becoming not a United Kingdom, but a United Nations, as people sort of sink into these ethno-nationalist silos. And we have Muslim enclaves, of course, which are segregated, and we know people in those communities are more than twice as likely to be sympathetic towards terror attacks, for example. So it's in all of our interests. And no one, of course, speaks about the growing issue of white flight within the UK. So the people are leaving the big cities as they feel more and more of a minority, and they're flooding into Cornwall, Devon, and these places. That's why property prices are rising up. And no one is talking about the self-imposed segregation. And allegedly, of course, above all of this, diversity is our greatest strength, of course.
Oh, well, that's very interesting, isn't it? You sometimes hear people say, import the third world, get the third world. Is that a racist statement?
I think it's a very accurate statement. There's nothing racist about any of this. I like to say this is culturalist. This is understanding that culture matters. So my great policy, one of my many great policy ideas, which I would love reform or someone to take on.
Prime Minister Rafe Hadelman-Cohen.
What I used to say is essentially, if you are just look at the illegal immigration. What we should do is get rid of the United Nations Convention on Refugees completely. That was created for a post-war world where you were talking about what do we do with the Jews and the Eastern Europeans who can't go behind the Iron Curtain. So of course we had to find a place for them. Nobody foresaw the mass movement of peoples across continents due to changes in transport and so forth. So I say we need a new international convention that says that asylum seekers must be rehoused within their continent of origin. So if you're fleeing Sudan, you go elsewhere in Africa. You're fleeing Vietnam, elsewhere in Asia. You're fleeing Palestine, you go elsewhere in the Middle East. You're fleeing Ukraine, you come to Europe. Because it's culture and it's religion that determine how successful you're going to be in integrating. This is not about race, it's not racist, it's common sense fact. And you'll be happier being in a culture and with a religion that is similar to yours. It works all round, especially with social conventions and traditions and things like that. And of course, you should be geographically close to where you came from because you're supposed to be here temporarily. The Germans get this, that after the catastrophe of Angela Merkel granting all those 1 million refugees access, now you only get temporary status. The idea is you go home. That's the way things should be.
How about this for our immigration policy? Low-level, highly skilled immigration based upon the expectation of integration.
Precise. And there's nothing racist about that at all.
And that sentence is the red line.
And you see, for many years, people said, oh, Canada is the most liberal, most left-leaning country in the world in the 1980s and 90s because of its immigration policy. No, it was choosing the very best, la creme de la creme from around the world. So the very best Muslim doctors, the very best Indian dentists, whereas we here had none of that. We invited in the world's flotsam and jetsam. That's the difference.
Well, that's right, because I think you and I are very happy to take nurses and doctors from Nigeria, computer programmers from Singapore, and entrepreneurs from Malaysia. And isn't that the point?
Yes.
It's not an anti-immigration position. It's if folk want to come here to this amazing country, they must be making a positive contribution, which is how any normal country functions.
Yeah, I just did a documentary with an American who wanted to have lessons for America on not following the British model. And I said, look at your Islamic communities. Well, firstly, there are as many Muslims in America as they are here, but they are professional classes. They're high levels of doctors and medicine and science and engineering. And you don't, and of course, they've come from cultures where they don't, where they do integrate far more. They're far more likely to intermarry than in our communities that we've brought here. So this is not about religion. This is not about race. This is about the culture they come from and their ability to contribute to our society. And I would be saying this about any community where we got people who were a net drain on the economy and were culturally destructive.
With me in the studio, the brilliant, the magnetic and the fabulously dressed Rafe Hadelman-Koo, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, broadcaster and journalist. Well, folks, a lot more to come. We're going to have a look at this Makerfield by-election. Is Andy Burnham now a shoe-in to win that by-election, re-enter the House of Commons and become Prime Minister? One of the big issues appears to be the threat to Reform UK of Restore and Rupert Lowe's insurgent party. So do the right in this country need to unite to get Labour out of power? We'll be discussing that with politics legend Sir Michael Fabricant next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
10:33, you are listening to Talk. It's Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. For the rest of the week, I'm going to be Ian Collins, which is an impossible task. Lovely to have your company. We've got an issue with the switchboard, but do book your place on the show a little bit later. At the moment, it's not showing up with the calls, but we want to get you on air with a few different questions. Is Nigel Farage the new working class hero of this country? And the BBC are going after cash-strapped Brits using bailiffs to get the licence fee. Is it time to get rid of this hated TV tax? But first, Nigel Farage urges voters on the right to unite behind reform to stop Andy Burnham, as the Makerfield by-election polls showed that it's a two-horse race, but it could be that Restore, of course led by Rupert Lowe, may thwart Reform's efforts to win that seat. Let's get reaction from Sir Michael Fabricant, former Conservative MP and now broadcaster and political commentator. Good morning, Sir Michael.
Good morning, Mark. And can I say, for those people watching on YouTube, how great you look, because normally, I must tell people that Mark is normally wearing a three-piece suit, a tie and a very formal shirt, and he looks absolutely great with a crimson open-neck shirt and a lovely white jacket.
Well, thank you for that appraisal. That's high praise coming from yourself, given what a clothes horse you are, Michael. If you want to see the ridiculous outfits we're all wearing, head to YouTube, search Talking Up, We Pop. So, Michael, so many stories to get through, including dodgy EU loos that don't work. But can I ask you about your appraisal of the political right at the moment? Are they going to essentially help the left in Bakerfield and potentially at the next election by fighting with each other?
Absolutely, yes. And, you know, there's practical examples of this. I mean, my own old constituency of Lichfield, the right absolutely outvoted Labour. But because Reform and the Conservatives were split, I got about 16,000 votes, but Reform got 10,000 votes. It let a Labour MP in, which was the last thing that either Reform or Conservative voters wanted. And frankly, that was how the Labour government that we currently have got elected. It was the split votes between the Conservatives and Reform. And now we see the same thing happening again in Makerfield, because you've got Restore breaking in and maybe getting 7% of the vote. That's the current estimate made by the pollsters. And you know what? That will mean that Andy Burnham will slip in through the middle. And I don't think that's what either Restore, Reform or Conservative voters want in Makerfield.
Most definitely. Rafe, what do you make of this political psychodrama playing out between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe, who at one point were political allies?
I think it's deeply unfortunate, and I can only think of how strong reform would be in the polls if Rupert was still in. We're still in the party, and we hadn't had those unfortunate scenes. But, you know, Sir Michael is absolutely correct. Look, Andy Burnham is the only leadership candidate that the polls say has a chance of beating Keir Starmer. If Keir Starmer goes head-to-head with Miliband, with Rayner, with Streeting, he's forecast to beat all of them. So if you vote for... if you split the vote and you allow Andy Burnham in, he's almost certain to become Prime Minister of this country. And that's what matters, because if you look at the broader national polling, Andy Burnham on the last poll has a chance of beating the reform. The Labour Party certainly will come into top place if he becomes Prime Minister. The question then is, does Andy Burnham use that honeymoon period, use that bounce to call a sudden snap general election and use his honeymoon to get some sort of majority government, which means another 5 years, potentially of an even worse, even more woke and progressive government? That's a disaster for everybody. So yes, obviously at this stage, I don't think anyone's going to stand their candidates down in the Makerfield by-election, but I want all voters who are scared about Burnham and Labour getting another election to think about voting tactically. Put aside your grievances about disputes between parties for this one by-election. And if you're in Makerfield, just vote tactically for the person that you think is most likely to be able to defeat Burnham, and that obviously seems to be the Reform candidate in this case.
Most definitely. And chaps, I've been crunching the numbers. Sir Michael and Rafe, if you look at the outcome of the last general election and the popular vote, the Conservatives achieved just shy of 7 million votes. Reform UK, just over 4 million. If you combine that, it comes to almost 11 million people having voted for a right-wing party. 11 million. Well, 9.5 million people voted Labour. So we really ought to have a right-leaning Conservative administration. The problem we have, Michael, is divided parties on the left and the right are going to absolutely and drastically impact the outcome. It's mathematics, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, the Makerfield by-election is turning not so much into a by-election, but a grudge match. You've got Starmer versus Burnham. Sue Gray has now joined the field, a supporter of Burnham. You remember she was the chief of staff to Starmer in number 10, and then she was sacked by Starmer, and now she's getting her own back by backing Burnham. And you've got the private unfortunate squabble between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. And Rupert Lowe, it's a grudge match again. And you could argue it's very, very selfish, because the losers are not going to be those individuals. The losers will be the United Kingdom as a consequence. And let's not make any mistake. Andy Burnham, you know, is a lovely, great guy to meet, and I've met him lots of times. But, you know, there are so many things that went badly wrong during his administration of the Manchester area when he was, in fact, he still is, the mayor of Manchester. And being PM, I think he will be far, far left of Starmer. So if you think things are bad now, they're going to get far worse.
Most definitely. Sir Michael, tell me about dodgy EU toilets that don't work.
Well, this was a great campaign of mine, because in Lichfield there is a town called Armitage, which is not far away, and some great there's a plum pudding pub. There's some great pubs, very, very nice in Armitage, including I'm trying to remember the name of it. Anyway, that's not important. What is important is that in Armitage is one big factory called Armitage Shanks, or was called Armitage Shanks. It's now owned by an American group, Ideal Standard, or American Standard as it's known in the US. Anyway, the point is this, that in 1997, when Tony Blair got in, full of enthusiasm for the European Union, the European Union was saying that the British siphonic toilets, get that word out, siphonic, and not what some Labour minister called symphonic when I actually introduced it as a debate. The siphonic toilet is slightly more expensive than the valve toilet that they have in Europe. But in France, they reckoned at the time, back in 1997, that 400 million gallons every year, just in France alone, are wasted by water trickling out of the toilet and literally going down the pan. And the point with the siphonic system is you need a vacuum. I'm getting very technical here, to actually make the toilet work, which means it won't leak. It's brilliant. But what did Tony Blair do? He allowed these European toilets in. But now we hear that the Labour government are thinking of doing a U-turn about the U-bend, because they're now thinking, you know what? The Brits got it right all along, right from the very beginning. So we could be seeing a Brexit dividend, which will mean that we'll have the siphonic, non-leaking toilets back again. And incidentally, the siphonic toilet system, which is so good, was invented by no less than Thomas Crapper. And I'll let you work out for yourself how he became a very famous person indeed, both in the UK and the US, and especially in Australia.
Most definitely. Thank you for that history lesson. But I think it's important because we've had these leaky loos. They're as the result of, obviously, a policy of allowing these. Were they pitched as being more eco-friendly? What was the argument for these European lavatories, Sir Michael?
The only argument, and it was just one argument, was that it was stopping Italian and French manufacturers from selling into the UK. The European Union said that it was a barrier to trade and that we deliberately had the siphonic system to stop these European trashy toilets coming to the UK.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that. It was because the British toilet system, the siphonic system, actually works. And when they have toilet systems in America, because often it's a different type of valve, you know, where you sort of put down a plunger type thing, which operates a high pressure thing, which is a different system altogether. But when they have regular toilet systems in the US, they use our system because they know it's better too.
Most definitely. And a lot of this pertains to those toilets with two buttons for flushing. Is that right?
That's right. Well, that was an argument.
Which I've always hated those. Just give me one good flush, please.
Yeah, the argument was it uses slightly less water if you whittle in the toilet and you don't want to have a full flush. But actually, the amount of water it saves is far, far less than the 400 million gallons every year wasted by the leaky valve, which inevitably happens with these toilets that you get. I've had literally a brand new toilet fitted in where I am now, in the middle of Wales, where it's glorious and sunny, by the way. And it's been leaking actually from about a month old. And that's what they do. It's an inferior system. But Labour, of course, made light of it at the time. And sadly, the consequence was these cheaper toilets came in. Not only did we have leakage, but more sadly, Armitage Shanks got taken over by Ideal Standard, the US firm, because they started losing money on this, and that's a great shame.
Well, Rafe, yielding to the will of the EU has been very costly for this country over many years, hasn't it? For example, do you remember the carbon targets under the premiership of Tony Blair with Gordon Brown in number 11, in which we were all encouraged to purchase diesel rather than petrol-engined cars because they produced lower CO2 emissions? That was an EU directive. Well, it was a terrible policy because the emissions from diesel engines are far worse for human health. So what we've done is essentially sacrificed our health at the altar of an EU directive on carbon.
Yes, but can I just say, one of the reasons I love Talk is that we have, this is the only place where you get a knight of the realm giving a passionate and patriotic defence of British lavatories and detailed information about the leaky valves of foreign loos. I think it's absolutely glorious. And yes, he's quite right on all the points he makes, as are you. Remember how many people invested in these diesel in these diesel engines and diesel cars, and of course all the damage that that caused not only to themselves but also to their pocketbooks, people forget about as well. And then you had the scandal, didn't you? Was it of Volkswagen, I believe it was,
yep,
who was basically faking their emission standards?
Well, we poisoned the lungs of our kids in the name of carbon emissions as a result of an EU directive. It's very clear that the emissions from a petrol engine are far safer for human health than diesel engines. And I believe it was in 2000 we had around 1 million diesel cars. By 2010, it was 10 million. So we by an order of magnitude, we purchased diesel cars. And have we saved the planet with that?
No, well, you could argue have anything that we've done in this country actually save the planet, given that we only account for 1% of emissions, and we're essentially hog-tying ourselves, tying our hands behind our back while other countries leap forward in leaps and bounds ahead of us. I would say, look at Poland. Poland's grown its economy by 18%. We've since 2019, we've only grown our economy by 1%. But yep, you're absolutely right. And the key thing here for me is that no heads rolled over this diesel issue. Time and again, we see these sorts of devastating decisions being made. This, as you say, has affected the lives, the health of people in this country, and yet nobody has been held to account for it.
Most definitely. Sir Michael, we know you're on a busy schedule. Might you be available to stay with us for after the break until 11?
I can, yes, indeed.
Oh, that's fantastic news, because we know you've got lots on today, but I'm so happy because I want to ask you about Reform UK and your reaction to their policy announcement that they would like to scrap income tax on overtime hours worked. Plus, is a peace deal in the Middle East in the offing? And has, therefore, Donald Trump been proved right in his efforts to disarm Iran? That plus the BBC licence fee, what do you think? Do you still watch the BBC? Do you still love the BBC? Does it feel like it belongs to you? Because you most certainly pay for it. Let me know your thoughts. Is it time to get rid of the hated TV tax? We'll play out this part with a voice note from lovely Elaine.
Looking good today. No tie. What's going on? Have a lovely day.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks. That's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Big apologies, the phone lines are down, but I'm going to have a look at your texts into the show as well. Just text the word talk and your message to 87222. Our switchboard is not working. I'm not able to put calls to air. I'm really sorry about that. Why don't you go for voice notes? I think Ted is already trawling through quite a few that have come in. I voted for Reform when they were grassroots, says Red. I left when Farage came back as I don't trust him and don't want a Muslim PM in Zia Yusuf. This from Matthew in Cheltenham. Good morning, Mark. I was in Canada for 25 years and have joint citizenship. Your guest, Rafe, is only half right. Canada is shockingly left-wing, thanks to the Trudeau family. But Rafe is right about talent because they work on a points system. But the problem is that once they're in, they use the system to get all of the relatives in the back door. They do not integrate. There are areas throughout the Gooden Horseshoe, Toronto area, which are West Indian, East Indian, Chinese, because they won't integrate. In fact, they openly want other races out of their areas. Well, that's what happens, isn't it, Rafe?
Yeah, I should say I used to live in Canada. So what I was talking about specifically, I said Canada was seen as very left-wing in the 80s and 90s, when this wasn't the case. In the 80s and 90s, they were cherry-picking the best and the brightest. I wasn't referring to what's happened recently in the last decade or so under Trudeau, when, yes, suddenly Canada has become just as crazy, if not crazier, than Britain. But in the period of the 80s and 90s, when everyone celebrated Canadian immigration, they were choosing a very, very different type of immigrant to what they've encouraged today. And yes, the rate of change in Canada has been remarkable, and not in a good way.
Not in a good way is absolutely right. So, Michael, Nigel Farage has announced that if he becomes Prime Minister, one of his first policies will be to scrap income tax on overtime. Is this a good move? You're not just ex-politician of significant stature, you're an entrepreneur as well. Do you think this policy will work? Now, we're just getting the line to Sir Michael at the moment. He's been thwarted. He's been censored, actually, because he's dropping too many truth bombs. Sir Michael, Nigel Farage to scrap income tax on overtime hours. Your reaction?
Right. I don't know what bit you caught. I think it's a good idea in principle. It will cost about £5 billion. But, you know, we have a real problem in this country with both tax and benefits, which actually both of them work together to conspire to be a disincentive to work. And this is the issue in this country. It's often better just not to work than to work. And this is the idea behind Nigel Farage's good idea. But in practice, the question is, well, it's going to cost around £5 billion, which the Exchequer won't get if we put this in place. Of course, ultimately, it'll be collected because people, we think and hope, and that's the whole aim of it, will work harder. And when you work harder, you do pay more tax, and that's fair. But in the short term, nothing will happen. In the short term, there'll be a lag. So where is he going to fill that £5 billion from? But as far as I'm concerned, anything that encourages people to work and get off their big fat bottoms has to be a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
Rafe, I like the messaging of this policy because it encourages people to work hard rather than punishing them to do so. I'm a little worried about execution. I'm worried about companies having workarounds, and I'm worried about corruption.
Yeah, no, well, I think you're right on all 3 points there, and that's obviously the first point is why Nigel and Reform have done this. It's going to play very well with his voters. People must be seen that work actually pays. Of course, we now know, obviously, being in benefits pays often more than being in work pays. So if you can actually do overtime and retain all of that income, I think that's going to be only for the better for Britain, particularly, of course, when we have a productivity crisis in this country. We need to do all that we can to get as many shoulders behind the wheel of British industry and British work in every way. But yes, you're always going to have rascals and rogue employers who are going to try to do what they can to circumnavigate all these sorts of things. And you are going to, of course, have endemic corruption, as we see so much is happening. And, of course, if you're in the underground economy, which so many people are, where most of this corruption happens, there's no distinction at all going to be made.
So, Michael, Fabricant, long-term unemployment hits a decade high. And, of course, we have the highest youth unemployment in the whole of Europe. Labour isn't working.
No, but should we be surprised? Not only did we have the 2% rise on national insurance, we also had business rates going back up again, which is destroying the nighttime economy where many young people do work, or they would work if the businesses were still in business. This is all predictable. So why has it happened? And it's happened because hardly anyone on the Labour Party parliamentary side, whether they be frontbenchers or backbenchers, have run anything in their life. Before I became a Member of Parliament, I ran a business which set up radio and TV stations, originally in the UK, and then we did it in 48 different countries around the world who were clients of ours. And one thing I was very aware of was cash flow as well as profitability. And I don't think my company could have actually survived under the present condition, because it goes out of its way to encourage people not to work and to drive businesses out of business. And it's all predictable, and it was predictable from day one when Labour first got into office, and you had Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer talking down the economy and saying, oh, there's going to be a crisis, oh, we're going to have to bring in a budget which will be really punitive. And because they did that, businesses stopped investing. It was predictable, but not to this Labour lot. The incompetence is utterly staggering.
It is, and it's very sad to see what businesses are going through, because I take the view, Rafe and Sir Michael, that businesses are very virtuous organisations because they employ people so the state doesn't have to, and they create products that we purchase and consume, and of course they generate national income. So if I was Prime Minister, we can but dream, I would love bomb the businesses, and I think there is a left-wing progressive case for low taxes and a business-friendly environment. I think to a degree New Labour got it, but this current Labour administration do not. It is a race to the bottom. Let's take a voice note from Kevin.
These people that say they don't want Nigel Farage in because he'll destroy the country. Well, isn't that what this government's doing now, destroying the country? It's put thousands of people out of work, thousands more to come. We've got loads of migrants here who aren't working, getting benefits, and they want more of them come to do the skilled jobs that nobody will do. Really?
Most definitely. And I do think, Sir Michael, that the establishment media outlets are deafening in their silence in regard to this failing government. We know that when Liz Truss had her economic challenges after the mini-budget, there was hell to pay. We've had 4 years of the evil Tories, but somehow I feel that the media are letting Labour off the hook.
Well, yes, I mean, people talk about the Liz Truss brief administration, and Keir Starmer likes to say it was an absolute catastrophe. But by all statistical measures, it's more of a catastrophe now, because under Liz Truss, we still had unemployment going down, we still had growth going up, and although borrowing rates were high, you know what? Now we've got unemployment going up, growth has gone right down to under 1%, and we're borrowing far higher than at higher rates of interest than we ever did under Liz Truss. So why aren't the media saying Rachel Reeves is the catastrophe? In fact, compared to Rachel Reeves, Liz Truss was a success.
Because most high-profile journalists and TV radio outlets are sympathetic to the Labour cause, are they not, Sir Michael?
Well, I think this is the point that our friend across the pond, Donald Trump, feels very much. For some reason or other, you know, you work in the media. I used to be a BBC radio journalist a long time ago, and I was in a minority, as you are, Mark. Most people in the BBC newsroom and other big newsrooms, and I'm going to include ITN, or the ITV network, tend to be left of centre. And I think it's partly because London is so atypical of the rest of the country. You still have stronghold areas in London which support Labour, which is certainly not the case in most parts of the country.
Absolutely. Sir Michael, enjoy the sunshine. Loved our conversation. Rafe is staying with us. So much more to come. Reform UK. Are they the true working class party of this country? So much more to come. Keep it talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes past 11, this is Talk. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. And breaking this morning, is a peace deal coming? Reports have emerged overnight that America and Iran have hammered out a settlement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and deprive Iran of the ability to make nuclear weapons. So has Donald Trump won this war, and has he won the argument in the Middle East? Meanwhile, the BBC is now using debt collectors to get money out of cash-strapped Brits. Is it time to get rid of this hated TV tax? Do you still watch the BBC? Do you listen to it? Do you still love the BBC? Does it feel like it belongs to you? Producer Ted is shaking his head. He's not happy at all. He's all about Netflix and, of course, Talk. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. The brilliant Kieran is taking your calls. You can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online. And it may well be that you've got the radio on in the garden. Gorgeous sunny day across the country. Bank holiday, of course. You may have this show on the radio in your van or in your car as you work, because millions of Brits are working this bank holiday, in which case I salute your contribution to the unstoppable powerhouse that is the great British economy. You can also watch the show and see my controversial outfit, which I've got to tell you has horribly divided opinion. So if you want to find out what I'm wearing, don't worry, I'm wearing something. Head over to YouTube, search Talk and up we pop. Actually, Ted, if I was wearing nothing, would the numbers go up? I dread to think. Live in the studio, the fully clothed and extremely elegant Rafe Hadelman-Koo joins us, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Hello, Rafe.
Greetings.
Very good to have you with us. We're talking about Reform UK this morning because, of course, they have designs on power. Yesterday, they announced a policy to scrap income tax on overtime. But will they ever see power if the right remain divided? Nigel Farage has been speaking to the press this morning, saying that Reform may lose this by-election in Makerfield because of the support that some voters have for Restore UK, which, of course, is Rupert Lowe's insurgent party. Rafe, are you worried about a divided right?
I am very much so. Firstly, in Makerfield, because if Andy Burnham wins, he's the only candidate who is forecast in the polls to be able to beat Keir Starmer. And if he beats Keir Starmer and becomes Prime Minister, a Labour led by Andy Burnham is likely to basically beat Reform in the polls. So anybody on the right who's concerned about extending Labour for another 5 years at a general election needs to think seriously about where they cast their vote. You know, even if you don't like Reform, for example, just think about the greater issue and the greater problem. But can I just also say, yes, the reason we've had strong government on the right in this country in recent decades is because there's only been one party on the right. With the exception of 2015, in every recent general election, more votes were cast for centre-left parties. I don't think enough people understand this. More people in this country vote for left-wing parties than vote for right-wing parties. But the left have been split between Plaid's, SNP, Lib Dems, Labour and the Green Party. If we start doing the same on the right, because more vote for the left, we could be out of power for a generation, if not more. And the next election is even more crucial because nobody makes this really fundamental point. Right-wing voters are dying at a far faster rate than left-wing voters. By 2030, 1.4 million right-wing voters will have died, compared with only 400,000 left-wing voters. That means if you're going to have a chance to reverse the left's long march through the institutions, to stop immigration, save your country, you need to actually change the minds of young people who are now, of course, increasingly. We have the most radically left-wing youth in history. They're not becoming more conservative as they grow older. Particularly women. But even there's a myth in this country that the male youth are becoming right-wing in great numbers. Only 24% of youth in this country vote for right-wing parties. 75% are left-wing. That's higher than in any other demographic. So it's crucial at this election, maybe at the next election, the last chance you have to ensure that kids in this country aren't being indoctrinated in our schools for the next 10 years, which will make the matter all the more worse. We need to ensure we get a right-wing government in this election and give them a 10-year mandate to do what is necessary to do. I mean, the great tragedy is we should be 14 years into this project, but we had the Conservative in name-only party, I call it the neoliberal party, and Boris Johnson did nothing to reach out to the youth of this country. Everything was about triple-lock pensions, nothing done to reach out to the youth, and now we on the right are paying the price for it. So yes, think tactically, vote for the people who can actually hopefully bring in a right-wing government that can reverse the damage that's been done.
What do you think, folks? Should voters on the right unite behind Reform UK to keep Labour out of power at the next election? Let me know your thoughts on that. Is it time for everyone on the right to back Nigel Farage? 0344 499 1000. I'd love to know what you think about that. The issue we have with Rupert Lowe is he's a very articulate man. I've known Rupert for years. He's a gentleman, extremely clever, successful entrepreneur, former football club chairman and a farmer as well. So this guy's got deep life experience. He's a patriot. He speaks a lot of sense on X. It's hard to disagree with almost any of his posts on there. The issue we've got is he'll never be Prime Minister, and much of what he says and proposes is fantasy politics.
Yeah, I have to say, everybody knows my politics is very conservative. No one would say that I'm in any way, wet or limp-wristed on any of this sort of a thing. Rupert Lowe and I see eye to eye on so many issues. And on the core issues that come for this country, there isn't much that actually distinguishes Restore from Reform, I have to say, is quite honestly. And if you actually look at what Rupert Lowe says online, of course, he's not in charge of his Twitter accounts. Whatever's posted on social media isn't necessarily coming from him. And you contrast it with what he said in interviews, they are very, very different. So actually, if you look at what Rupert Lowe says when he's actually in a face-to-face interview, there isn't much difference between him and Reform at all on many, many issues. In fact, you could say a lot of things he said are actually more weak than Reform when you look at him in a face-to-face interview. So there are...
Some people call him a closet Tory.
So, well, there's another question. I'm not here to see... what I don't like is I don't like the internecine fighting between people on the right. I want to bring everyone together, and I've got many people who follow me who are Restore voters, and I sympathise with them, and I understand all their issues and causes, and I'm a kindred spirit on many things. But we have to be practical here. The risk of having an Andy Burnham government is so great. We have to get behind whoever we believe is going to win. And I do support Reform. I'm happy to say that now on air. I think Reform has to be the vehicle for change. I'm happy to give them my support.
Why has a robust and very, very considered Conservative exited the Conservative cause and backed Reform? Why have the Tories lost you?
Well, I haven't been with the Tories for a decade.
Is that right? And why would that be? Is that because the leftist
Tories,
creep began a decade ago?
The leftist creep began a long time ago, but certainly 2010, you could say, was the moment at which the Tories stopped being the Conservative Party and became a neoliberal party. True conservatism is about conserving society. The clue is in the name. You're supposed to conserve. Neoliberals would happily build a motorway through a pastoral landscape. They don't care about defending the working class of this country. Progress is better, free market. No, I believe that it's the duty of Conservatives to ensure that everybody in society has their communities and their way of life preserved, and that we ensure that our children inherit the very best aspects of British life. And I'm sorry, the greatest act of harm in our history was mass immigration. And rather than stop mass immigration, the Tories put the pedal to the metal. 7% of this country's population changed in just 3 years between 2021 and 2024. That was the biggest change in population in 1,000 years. The Tories should have reversed the left's control of our institutions. They should have reversed the left's control of our museums, of our galleries, of our universities, of our schools, of the civil service, of the media. They did none of that. In fact, things got far worse under them. They, as far as I'm concerned, the Tory party needs to die. There needs to be a hostile takeover of the Conservative Party by the Reform Party. That's what happened in Canada. In Canada in '93, the Conservative Party of Canada was the government. They lost that election. They were left with only 2 seats. The Reform Party of Canada, very similar to the Reform Party here, became the biggest right-wing party in the Parliament. They took over the Conservative Party, and a new Tory party was born. It stopped being the Progressive Conservative Party. There's an oxymoron for you. And there was a new Tory party formed, and that now runs, and it's much more conservative and much more linked into the people. That's what needs to happen here. And the great tragedy of the last election was the Tories didn't lose enough seats, so they never felt that there was an existential crisis. but people need to understand all these issues and vote tactically at the next general election.
We've seen, haven't we, the same thing happen in Australia with the collapse of the Liberal Party, which are the equivalent of the Tories there, and they're being usurped by One Nation, led by Pauline Hanson, who's been a regular on my show at the weekend. However, is the tide turning? So, for example, you've got a Labour Home Secretary who has announced a policy in which you will have to wait twice as long for settled status indefinitely to remain in this country. You will need a command of the language. You will need to be able to make an economic contribution, and you cannot have a criminal record. We can welcome that policy from a Labour Home Secretary. A potential incoming Prime Minister in Andy Burnham has let it be known he will support that policy, which was in question just a week ago. Meanwhile, you've got a French politician making the following statement. We have reached the limit, announces French Minister of Justice Gérald Darmanin, as he plans to stop legal immigration into France for 3 years. We have reached the limit, says a mainstream French politician. Is the pendulum swinging?
Pendulum is swinging, and as I said, the people need to understand that migration still is a huge issue in this country. Don't believe the net migration figures. We've just been sold about 141,000 migrants coming here. The real number is 800,000 because, of course, we're talking about gross migration figure. But yes, of course, we have to celebrate any policies that are correct. And I'm not party political. I'm happy to support policies if Labour puts them forward. But don't be fooled by all the spin. Labour, of course, is not being as draconian as everyone thinks. Edward Lee, the veteran Tory MP, said Shabana Mahmood is the best Home Secretary of the Tory party. But the reality is, of course, there are still ways you can fast-track yourself into having citizenship in only 5 years if you're an asylum seeker, if you're a certain type of migrant to this country. To really get real, if you really want to stop people coming here and create a real deterrence, abolish indefinite leave to remain, ensure that nobody who is here is entitled to benefits unless they are a citizen. Citizenship after 15 years, then you're entitled to benefits and social housing. And if people have to make it here on their own for 15 years, my God, will you see those numbers come down, because they won't be able to survive here. And so you will only be left with the very brightest, the very best, the high earners, not the flotsam and the jetsam we have invited into this country. 3/5 of the migrants we've had come to this country have been a net drain on the economy. They've been low-skilled, low-wage earners. You know, the only reason that there was a justification for immigration, for all the social tensions, for all the cultural erosion, for all the antisocial behaviour, the knife attacks, the acid attacks, the honour killings, the child marriage, the cousin marriage, the gangs with machetes fighting in the streets, all that we were told was worth it because of the economic imperative of mass immigration to actually fund our public services. Well, I'm afraid all the evidence shows that wasn't the case. That argument, the economic argument, has been blown out of the water. So yes, we actually do need a moratorium. In fact, it's very interesting, you know, America had huge mass immigration outside of the Anglosphere world in the 1880s to the 1920s. Biggest period of immigration, Jews and others from Eastern Europe, Italians came in. That caused a lot of tension in America, because America has never been a nation of immigrants. America and Canada were settled colonies filled with people from the British Isles, and Germany. But then you got all these people coming from outside Western Europe. What did it do? It had 40 years of almost no immigration, very limited immigration from the 1920s to the 1960s, to give the nation time to breathe, to absorb those who had come and have them buy into America. And you know what? 1920 to 1960 was the greatest period of growth. It was the golden age. Harmony, social cohesion, peace, prosperity, a land of milk and honey. We might be wise to try to think about something like that for us.
And America has never been all in with the multicultural experiment, which is a socialist ideology.
Yeah, the great contrast is Canada versus America. Both have had big immigration. In Canada, they say we are a mosaic. Come here, celebrate your culture, weave your culture into the national fabric, the national quilt of Canadian life. In America, it was the melting pot rather than a mosaic. Come here, you can celebrate your cultures and everything else, but there's one overarching American culture. And I think we need to have more of that in this country. There's nothing wrong with celebrating your own heritage, your own culture, of course. Have your feast days, your festivals, but there should be one overarching British culture. This is the era of identity politics. Everyone can celebrate their identity apart from the English and the British more broadly, but we must prioritise the one umbrella culture that all of us should be able to be part of.
Most definitely. Get those calls in. Do you still love the BBC? They're now using bailiffs and debt collectors to shake money out of cash-strapped Brits. Let me know, 0344 499 1000. And do the right need to unite behind reform in order to prevent another 5 years of a left-wing administration? Lots of texts coming in. Good morning, Mark. Kirsty from West Yorkshire. As soon as Labour got into power, I took a second job, as they always take more from us. I work a minimum of 40 hours a week in my employment, finishing most days at about 6 p.m. I then start my second freelance role until 9:30 p.m. This is most weekdays. I work every weekend and will be doing so this bank holiday weekend. Reform has just piqued my interest with this policy of scrapping income tax on overtime. Some of my lefty friends are angry with me for having two jobs, as they see it as I'm taking a job from someone else. But I've always been a worker and have decent skills. So why wouldn't I use them? You can't win with the left. As Mike Neville says, they never sleep. Great show as always. Kirsty, what a fantastic message. And can I congratulate you on your amazing career? 2 jobs there, your work ethic as well. And the idea that you would be taxed on your overtime is so wrong. And I think this is a very, very positive policy, as long as it's not exploited by unscrupulous and corrupt employers. Mark in Stratford. Hello, Mark, and hello, Rafe. Ben Habib wants Andy Burnham to beat reform in Makerfield and therefore potentially become PM. This tells you all you need to know about him and that other bitter man, Rupert Lowe. It's all about ego, and they don't have the country's interests at heart. Thank you for that, Mark. Maggie in London. Good morning, Mark. Am I reading you wrong? But you of late seems to be against Nigel and blowing the trumpet for Lowe. I agree with Michael. If Burnham gets in, then the UK loses out. Do we want Starmer ×2? I think not. No, not at all, Maggie. I think what I would say about Rupert Lowe is he's a very considered and intelligent man. He has a lot of support in the country. And I think that a lot of what he says on X makes a lot of sense. I think in an ideal world, he could be the ideological North Star that guides the Reform UK project. It would certainly help if they were not fighting like rats in a sack. So much more to come. This is Talk. It's 11:19.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you back Reform UK's policy of scrapping income tax on overtime? Jen has messaged the show. Good morning, Jen. I hope you're having a good bank holiday Monday. She's in Wolverhampton. She says, Mark, regarding income tax, one big problem is that if you have a second job, it's a rip-off because it's taxed at the basic rate. Reform ought to look into changing that. I do agree with you, Jen. I think the devil will be in the detail when it comes to that policy. Paul says, I voted for Rupert Lowe in Great Yarmouth because I wanted a council to work with Restore. But the only way to protect our country is to vote Reform at the next general election. This from Suze. Good morning, Mark. I'm so angry with Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore. He knows he cannot win this race in Makerfield. He's not putting the survival of the country first. I will leave this country if Burnham wins. Starmer got one thing right in his speech on the day of the Unite the UK march. This is a fight for the soul of our country, and he's on the side of more destruction. While Farage wants to save the country, I've previously admired Lowe. Now I think he is the devil. And this from Paul. Mark, I'm not paying for a TV licence, and I don't see why I should. The BBC are biased towards the Labour Party. More of your feedback shortly. Now, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has described a case in which 3 teenage boys were spared custodial sentences over the rape of 2 girls as appalling. He added that it was absolutely right that the sentences given by a judge at Southampton Crown Court were being reviewed by the Attorney General. 2 girls, then aged 15 and 14, were raped in separate incidents in Fordingbridge, Hampshire, in November of 2024 and January 25 by 2 14-year-olds. Another boy, then 13, was also convicted for his involvement in the second attack. Let's get reaction to this verdict and the remarks of the Prime Minister from Danny Shaw, policing, crime and justice commentator. Hello, Danny. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Mark.
Well, it's the most tragic story and the most egregious and horrific crime. Were you surprised when you saw this sentence being passed?
Very surprised. I think the judge has got this wrong. I think the judge is right to consider the rehabilitation of the 3 young offenders as an important factor. I mean, what everyone wants to see is that these 3 never commit a crime ever again, and certainly never a crime like that ever again. So they need to be rehabilitated at some point. But what the judge failed to do, in my view, and I haven't seen the full sentencing remarks, but it seems to me that he's failed to understand that as well as their rehabilitation, there's a message that a case like this sends to the wider public. There's a deterrent effect, and there's also a protection issue around keeping the public safe from these 3. And there's also a justice point. Justice must be served, and there must be a sense that it's been served. And imprisonment in such a terrible case like this is really the only punishment that should be imposed. And so I do think that it's right that the case is being reviewed by the Attorney General, Lord Harmer. I'm pretty sure he will refer it back to the Court of Appeal. That's the only body that can increase the sentence and impose custody. And when the Court of Appeal, there'll be 3 judges who will hear that case, look at it. I'm pretty sure that they will impose a custodial sentence, perhaps not on all 3, but certainly on 2. But as I say, it will be up to the Court of Appeal ultimately.
Danny, does this soft verdict tell us anything about the culture of our modern judiciary?
I think what it tells us is this, is that in the past 15 years or so, Mark, there has been a big drive to keep young people under 18s in England and Wales out of the criminal justice system and to stop criminalising them if possible. So, you know, a young person cautioned or convicted for a minor offence, there'll be a big push. Let's not send them to custody. Let's try and keep them out of the system if possible. And that has driven down the number of young people in custody. It used to be around 3,000. It's now about 300 to 400. Now, there may be some good reasons why that's the case, and it may be that there are some young people who really shouldn't be in custody, and
because
that's right.
jail is bad for most children, isn't it?
Yeah, it worsens them. But there are some cases, I'm afraid, there are some cases which cry out for prison because they are so egregious, they're so serious, and it's the wider message that it sends to the public and to the victims about the crime. And this is one of those cases, and I think the judge has got it wrong. And I think there will be other cases like that where judges and magistrates sentencing thinking, well, if I send this young person to custody for 3 months, 6 months or a year, that's really not going to help their development very much. So I'll, impose a community order instead. And they perhaps don't always think about the impact that has on the victim, who's had to struggle to report the case to police and then have to give evidence and go through the trauma and the ordeal. And so I think the balance has moved too far in one direction.
And the problem with this soft verdict is it's likely, Danny, to diminish public trust in our system of justice.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it's so damaging, because people see those headlines and they think it's soft justice. Here we go. It's too lenient and so on. And it does undermine trust in the judiciary and in the system. And it also would, other victims thinking of reporting a terrible attack will be thinking, well, I'm going to go through all that trauma, and at the end of it, what's going to happen? They'll get a community order. I mean, the community order that's been imposed on these three is pretty punitive, Mark, I have to say that. I mean, 2 of them, it's 3 years. There'll be a curfew, there'll be tagging, there'll be activity requirements, they'll be very closely monitored and supervised. So it's not going to be a soft touch for them, but it's not the same as imprisonment and the message that sends.
Danny, you've got a tough job, haven't you, as a policing crime and justice commentator, one of the very best in the country in that role, because we've got the court backlog, which runs to thousands of cases. We've got full prisons and high rates of reoffending. British justice really is in crisis, isn't it?
Well, this government inherited a problem. I don't want to make a party political point, but they did
been going on for over a decade, hasn't it?
A huge problem.
It goes back to austerity, I suppose. 40% cuts to the Justice Department.
Exactly, and prisons were shut. Too few new prison places came on stream, and so what the government had to do was they were running out of prison places. And the only way to deal with that was emergency legislation to, in essence, let some offenders get off early and others won't go to prison. They'll be on community terms. And I didn't really see any alternative, realistic alternative that's being proposed. At the same time, they are building new prisons, but that takes time. That takes many years.
And of course, the people forget that the expansion of the prison estate was halted during the pandemic, which is a big factor as well.
Yes. Prison building sort of ground to a halt. There's also one of the major contractors went bust. That has added to the problems as well. So prisons are being built, but it takes many years before that comes on stream in the new places. So I do have some sympathy with the position the government found itself in, and having to introduce emergency early release schemes and then trying to switch the focus more to community terms with tagging. But then what you end up with is a situation, we'll come on to this, is that this appalling case of this plainclothes police officer who was beaten up, left with a broken ankle, broken leg, facial fractures, eye damage, and still suffering sort of the trauma and the pain 2 years later, where his attackers, one of them has been released from jail. He has served 82 days of a sentence of 3 years and 10 months. He served less than 3 months of a sentence of over 3 years in prison because effectively the various measures to reduce the prison population have kicked in his case, and so he's able to be released early. And you're going to get more cases like that will strike the public as absolutely outrageous, I'm afraid, and that is a consequence of a system where there isn't enough capacity in prisons, and so you have to try and reduce the numbers, and he's being let out on a tag.
Absolutely.
That man, Alex Quinn, now 20 years of age.
It's really, really shocking. An attack on a police officer, which in its own way is an aggravating factor, an egregious crime, could have killed that guy. 82 days served. But yes, I mean, I agree with you. I'll be the first to call out, in my view, Labour's impact on the economy since they won the election. I think they've made things worse. But when it comes to our justice system, this is a legacy of failure that goes back decades. And you won't see me ranting and raving about Labour on that one, because this has been a problem that just hasn't gone away, and it's about money, isn't it, and investment. And of course, unfortunately, justice always seems to be at the back of the queue for investment. Before we let you go, Danny, thank you for joining us on this sunny Monday. We've got some breaking news. Nicola Sturgeon's estranged husband has admitted embezzling £400,000 from the SNP. Peter Murrell, the party's former chief executive, and of course the ex-partner of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was led away in handcuffs and remanded into custody after pleading guilty to embezzling almost £500,000. He was accused of using the money to buy items including a motorhome and luxury goods. Of course, that marriage has ended, and that story caused huge political damage to Nicola Sturgeon and will likely taint her political legacy, Danny.
Well, it may do, but she has distanced herself from her husband, hasn't she? I don't know whether they have instituted divorce proceedings, but certainly they're not living together. And I mean, it's an extraordinary case. I mean, he will now surely be facing, I would have thought, a very lengthy prison term for this, even though he's pleaded guilty. So he'll get some credit for that in sentencing, but a lengthy prison term for doing that. It's just extraordinary when people in positions of power and influence like that commit acts like that to such an extent and think they can get away with it. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me.
It's really shocking. Danny, what a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Have a good bank holiday weekend. Danny Shaw is a policing and crime expert and commentator. A fascinating conversation. So much more to get through. What about this, folks, as a story? There is now a mad scramble by asylum seekers in this country to remain in the country before the laws get toughened up. Migrants scramble for British citizenship amid crackdown. We'll get reaction from the former head of UK Border Force, Tony Smith, next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, and let me tell you that migrants are rushing to apply for British citizenship in record numbers to avoid future restrictions on settlement rights planned by the Labour government. More than 312,000 refugees, migrant workers and their dependents applied for citizenship in the year to this March, the highest number on record and double the rate of 8 years ago, according to Home Office figures. Let's get reaction now from Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force. And Tony, with the rules getting tougher, it's not surprising that this scramble is happening.
No, it's not, Mark, really. As you know, the Home Secretary has proposed some changes in terms of the indefinite leave application process. Normally people who come here on temporary permits can get permission to stay after 5 years. She's saying she's going to extend that. That's not yet been put in place, but there are going to be a number of categories where you won't get permanent status in this country for some considerable time unless you apply to become a British citizen. And that's why I think we're seeing this scramble now, that people think that if those changes come in, I'd rather get my British citizenship now, because once I've got British citizenship, then of course I accrue all of the rights of every other British citizen, whereas if I remain on a temporary visa, then I don't get that sort of thing. So I think that's the main reason why we've seen this surge in applications.
I've got no problem with people applying for a visa to remain in this country and to work here, Tony. Do you think that overall the policy of indefinite leave to remain has been an historic mistake for the UK?
I think it has in recent years, Mark. When I worked in the department, I'm going back a long time now, but back in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, it was 4 years actually for settlement, but we weren't seeing the sorts of levels of immigration that we see now. I think that what's happened since the last 20 years or so, we've seen such huge numbers of people coming over here that I do think we need to look at it. And a number of other countries and even European countries will demand that you stay for many, many more years than that before you get full status. So I think the time is right now for a review of that policy, that's really, I think, what's prompted the changes in behaviour that we're seeing.
I haven't had the privilege of speaking to you since Shabana Mahmood decided that you would have to wait 10 rather than 5 years for settled status, and there would be several hoops to jump through, including a degree of income and the absence of a criminal record and the ability to speak the language to a high standard. Do you think this policy from the Home Secretary is enough to tackle, for example, illegal immigration?
I don't think it is in itself, Mark, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. You will know that the French have criticised us for having, a pull factor here, that it's much more attractive for people to be here rather than in mainland Europe. And that's one of the reasons, is that there was a path to citizenship, quite an early one. If you've got status in this country, there's a path to family reunification. And of course, we've got quite a generous welfare state in the UK. All of those are pull factors. And I think that's what's behind the Home Secretary's policy shift. But I don't think it's going to be enough to stop illegal migration in itself, because, but the problem we've got with irregular or illegal migration, particularly the boat arrivals, is that very few of them are ever going to be sent back, no matter what status you put them on, Mark, whether you let them stay permanently or temporarily. They're not going to go back. Only about 4% of boat arrivals have ever been returned. And so you've still got that constant flow of people that we're seeing right now, of people still wanting to come over here from mainland Europe, and in the knowledge that whatever else happens, they'll probably be allowed to stay here in the end, and they'll probably be allowed to work here and never be sent home. And I think that's what we've got to tackle fundamentally to stop illegal migration.
Here's an easy one for you, Tony, on a bank holiday Monday afternoon before you've had your first cold Budweiser and the barbecue, which is as follows. Why have the West opened their borders so enthusiastically in the last 10 to 20 years? Why have we seen illegal immigration at eye-watering levels across Europe and in the UK? Why have we had such a generous legal immigration system? What is going on? What is behind this, Tony? Because it's a major change.
Yeah, there's a number of factors, obviously, Mark, at play here. I mean, the migrant crisis of 2016, I don't know if you remember that, a decade ago now, but we had over 1 million illegal entries into the EU, many of those prompted by Germany, who were offering an open door, really, to anyone. There was a huge kerfuffle in the European Union about where people were going to go, who was going to go where, but that prompted the message, I suppose, to the human smugglers that actually, if you can get into the EU, a good chance of staying. Then we saw that onflow into the UK, and then of course you had this massive Boris wave. And I think here what we've seen over the years, even going back to my time in the Home Office, is the Treasury argument that immigration is good for the economy. That usually won the day with the last sets of governments that I know about until now. I think we've had some analysts now coming in on the right of the argument. So actually it's not an economic benefit to have low-skilled migration in large numbers. I think that tide has now turned. I think the Migration Advisory Committee are now saying that. But for many, many years, Mark, people were saying that immigration is a good thing for the economy, because the more people you have in your country, the greater the output, the greater GDP. Now, I'm not an economist, but I can understand the difference between GDP and GDP per capita. I think that's the problem, Mark, that people need to understand. It's quite complicated, but actually there is no real benefit in large-scale, low-skilled immigration. I think this government have recognised that now, and I think even the last government have recognised that they made mistakes in opening the doors under the Boris wave.
Well, stay with us if you can, Tony. Joining us on the line is Matthew in Warrington. Hello, Matthew.
Mark, you okay, mate?
Yeah, thanks so much for calling the show. What do you make of all of this?
Right, last night I watched that Simon Reeves Scandinavia, and he went to Norway, Sweden and Denmark, and obviously he said all the nice things, and at the end of each area he went to, came up to the same old problem, immigration.
Yep.
Sweden, bit of a soft touch, they're not messing about. They've decided that we're not going to put up with this. Denmark, they've even gone a bit further. They're saying, well, we're not having ghettos, so they're actually moving people out. So they're integrating, they're cutting the benefits, and saying if you don't send your kids to school and learn about the Danish way of life, then you're not getting anything, you're not welcome. And it seems to me, all across Europe, we've got the same problem. We're too scared to stand up and say, okay, yeah, by all means, come to our country, but you live by our rules, by our religions, by our ways of life. By all means, have a mosque or have your religion. But fundamentally, while you're in our country, you live and die by our rules. And it's about time now that someone, and these were left-wing parties as well. One was I think the one in Denmark, he was the left-wing socialist party, all about unions and people's workers' rights and everything. But he wasn't having none of it. So why can't we, as a great nation that we are, just say, OK, we'll look at a model like what they do in Australia or what they do in Scandinavia, and we'll stick to that. We'll now start putting that in place. You come to this country, you get assessed. You integrate. You don't just migrate. We don't have people living together in big huddles and causing friction and separation. You come to our country and you live and die by our rules. You swear allegiance to the Crown or to the Union Jack, and you accept that we have all different Christian societies here. We have women's rights. We have children go to school, and we live and we integrate together. Because at the moment, it is failing massively. We must be the worst country in the whole of Europe to be. We're just bowing down and letting people do whatever they want, and that is wrong. We can't maintain that. When our taxation is less than our welfare, and we've got no military, we've got no prisons. The reason we've got no prisons is because we're paying for welfare. So we can't. It's all right saying put these people in prison. Where are we going to put them? We're letting prisoners out for hurting police officers and doing 80 days. So we've got no. It's all right saying lock them up. We've got nowhere to lock them up.
Matthew, every word you've said is brilliant. I mean, that was 10 times better than any Dolan's dispatch. Stay with us, Matthew. Live in the studio, Rafe Hadel-Manku. Matthew gets it. Those who govern us do not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very good to talk about Sweden, actually. They've also got a policy of voluntary remigration, where they're paying people 300,000.
Immigration has been a disaster in Sweden.
Well, yeah. It's
a catastrophe.
We've heard about it being the rape attack, but also bombings. I mean, the Somali gangs have taken over much of Malmö and other places like that. But Denmark is what we should be talking about, because in Denmark, there's no political division about the issue. Here, it's a right-left issue. There, you've got a left-wing prime minister, former trade union leader, saying we want zero asylum seekers. Can you imagine Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer ever saying something like that? Now, how did they unite the left and the right? What they did is they made a different argument, and we need to think about that in this country. What they said was, look, we have a wonderful social welfare system here. Everyone says how great Denmark's social welfare system is. We don't want to be cruel to foreigners and outsiders, but you have a choice. You can look after your grandmothers, your neighbours, people like you who live in this country, or you can look after the stranger. We can't look after both. So this is not about cruelty, this is about love. But who do you want to love? And that's the way they've brought the whole nation behind them. And if we made that argument over here, I think people on the left will begin to understand.
And it's interesting, isn't it, Tony? Because in fact, Denmark rejected mass migration around 2014. They had what's been described as their Farage moment. Over a decade ago, they are united, as Rafe said, across the political spectrum against mass immigration, perhaps because as a small Scandinavian, relatively homogenous society, they felt the impact of immigration more keenly, whereas we've just sort of swallowed it up. Matthew in Warrington's made a lot of good points. What do you make of all of this, Tony?
Yeah, the Scandinavian model, and particularly the Danish model, is very interesting. I did attend an event at the Policy Exchange not long ago, actually, and there were a number of people there from the government. I think the Home Office have had people over in Denmark looking at their policies on all of this. And I think some of Shabana Mahmood's ideas about, things we've been talking about, extending temporary status, not giving immediate rights to people to settle here. Some of those things have been gleaned from their visits to Denmark, because, you're right, it is a left-wing government there. And the argument that Rafe just put forward is absolutely right. They have convinced the populace in Denmark that it does matter illegal immigration does matter. It's important that you control your borders, and the Danish vote so far has supported that, even to the left of the argument. I think the challenge we've got here is that, we have got, for relatively speaking, for a Labour Home Secretary, a pretty tough one in Shabana Mahmood. She is pushing the boundaries a lot further than her predecessor did. But we come down to this fundamental point about asylum. And is it okay for people to come from a safe country to another safe country and lodge asylum claim? I don't think it is. Now, we have got provision in our legislation going back to 2002 to deny an asylum claim from somebody who has arrived from a safe third country like France. That's been in place for a long, long time, but we haven't been able to implement it because we have not done the same thing for human rights claims, and we haven't got anywhere to send people back to. So we need to focus on those things. Are we saying that if you come from France or Belgium, well, look, these are safe countries. Their signatures, so you don't need to come here. It might lead a better life here. It doesn't mean you come here. We then bring in legislation and say you cannot claim asylum, you cannot claim human rights, you've come from a safe country, you will be detained and removed. That is the policy that's now being espoused by the Conservatives. Not always, and it's certainly been the policy from Reform all along. That's easier said than done, though, Mark. As your caller said, we haven't got anywhere to lock people up. Our prisons are already overflowing. The pressure on the border force at Manston is huge to grant temporary release into the community, and we have got a grey economy, which is in itself an attraction. So we've got that big policy divide here between the left and the right about whether or not it's okay to come from a safe country and claim human rights and asylum or not. And I think that's really what will be the dividing line, because if we don't have that removals deterrent, then I'm afraid we're still going to see people arriving by a small boat.
Matthew, you're a legend. What a brilliant call. Have a good Monday bank holiday if you've got any time off, Matthew in Warrington. And Tony, wonderful to see you again. Do join me soon. I've missed your words of wisdom. Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force. If only he was running the country's immigration policy right now, we'd be in a better state, would we not? So much more to get through. What about this? Andrew Mountbatten Windsor accused of inappropriate behaviour towards a woman at Royal Ascot. We'll get reaction from someone that knows Andrew well next.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, and the police investigation into Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is examining an allegation that he behaved inappropriately towards a woman at Royal Ascot. The incident allegedly took place in 2002 when the former Duke of York attended the racing event in Berkshire with his mother, Queen Elizabeth, during her Golden Jubilee year. Officers at Thames Valley Police are understood to be looking into the allegation as part of a wider investigation into Andrew over the alleged offence of misconduct in public office. Let's get reaction now from the former head of Royal Protection, Di Davies. Good morning, Di.
Hi, good morning to you, Mark.
These are serious allegations and go beyond the concern around misconduct in a public office.
Well, yes, if indeed they're true, but they're 23 years old and they're part of now, allegedly, the investigation into all manner of issues surrounding this man. Clearly, I'm pleased at long last, as well as misconduct as an envoy, they're actually looking at alleged allegations of sexual misconduct, going back to when originally Virginia Giuffre made her allegations, which the Met on 4 occasions decided, even 5 times, there was nothing to see here. So if they're actually seriously looking at all manner of allegations, and this is not the only one in respect of his alleged sexual behaviour, then I'm delighted. And I hope at long last, if it's true, justice can prevail. That's what I've been asking for a number of years.
Do you think there may be worse to come in relation to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and serious allegations?
Well, it depends what you mean by serious allegations. I think it can be broken down into 3 or 4 separate areas of serious allegations, including, I think, his work alleged as an envoy. I think some of the misgoings on there that he and his family are alleged to have been involved with are so serious it almost beggars belief. In terms of the sexual aspect, I don't know is the truth. I hope that the Thames Valley appeal will bring forward those, if indeed there are many more victims. Given his alleged behaviour at home and abroad, I'd be surprised if there wasn't. But given the furore, how many actually will now come forward is a matter of debate, I suggest.
Now, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor denies all the allegations being presented to him, and he's of course been found guilty of no crime in a court of law. But given all of these headlines and allegations around Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, does it tell us anything about the culture of the royal family, that he may have been able to conduct himself in this way without consequence?
Yes, I think that's a very fair question. What on earth was going on all this time? Didn't anybody at any level, from advisors to the late Queen, all the way to his private secretaries and others, and those who accompanied him, both at home and abroad, didn't anybody see, if all these allegations are true, didn't anybody comment? Didn't anybody decide in government, in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office? I could go on and on. I've described it as a tentacle, and those tentacles sadly appear, if these allegations are true, reach every level of the establishment. And how many of those are being questioned, I wonder?
Most definitely. Were you surprised when it was reported just a few days ago that the late Queen Elizabeth II campaigned and lobbied for Andrew to have this trade role?
No, I'm afraid nothing astonishes me anymore about anything related to the activity not only of the late Queen, his brother, the now King, and others, if some of these allegations are true. But I do think he was pandered. If you look at the evidence as has been now displayed, that he was allowed to say, you know, I can pick and choose, I don't want to do the paperwork, so on and so on. Everything points to such a privileged, arrogant individual who, from the Queen downwards, I'm sad to say, let him get away with it. And sadly, the victims that we're now talking about are the ones who suffered, along with the taxpayer. We spent millions and millions protecting him, his wife, and his daughters, totally unnecessary in many cases. And I just think the whole thing stinks. And I hope somebody has the moral courage to come out and actually point the finger at those who've aided and abetted him. That's my theory.
Andrew is a spoiled brat, isn't he?
It would appear so on the evidence that we have seen so far. And again, how much more evidence do you need in terms of being a spoiled brat, as you put it? Whether he's guilty of the other matters is a matter ultimately for a court of law. I just hope he ultimately, like you and I, alleged to have committed these offences, he does appear in court. Whether he will or not is debatable.
Well, I'm delighted to say, Di, that Rafe Hadelman-Koo is with us, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum and somebody that's written and broadcasted a lot about the royal family. What do you make of these latest allegations, Rafe?
Well, no surprise, as Di was saying. Of course, the problem is it's very difficult to actually convict somebody of misconduct in public office because we don't actually know whether his role as a trade envoy meets the threshold. Normally it'll be government ministers, it'll be people in the police and so forth, but we don't know whether this role applies. So they are trying their very best to find something that will stick. Yes, you can use financial impropriety, but you can also do sexual inappropriateness, which is why we're seeing this appeal. Now, there's been so much discussion about Andrew's activities. It's hard to think that a new appeal couldn't lead to anything new, because surely if you have an issue, you would have brought it forward. We can hope if there are any victims that they will come forward. There is, of course, this question about whether a victim was sex trafficked into a royal residence in 2010 as well. I wouldn't apportion blame to Her late Majesty, however, because, of course, the role of trade envoy was one traditionally for a member of the royal family, had been the Duke of Kent beforehand. There is a soft power element to having a member of the royal family do that. Monarchs in the Middle East love having a member of the royal family, so it's understandable why the Queen would want her son to have such a role.
Di Davies, only a couple of seconds left. Can the royal family survive the Andrew scandal?
Yes, I hope so. For the sake of all of us, really, we need a constitutional monarchy, but it has to be based on common sense, decency, and certainly have a moral base, which some of them appear not to.
Di, wonderful to see you again. Thank you for joining us on this Bank Holiday Monday. Di Davies, former head of Royal Protection. Next up, the most famous political double act in the country, Neil and Christine Hamilton. Is Nigel Farage a working class hero? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is talk.
You are listening to Talk, and it's Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. And breaking this afternoon, is a peace deal coming? Reports have emerged overnight that America and Iran have hammered out a settlement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and deprive Iran of the ability to make nuclear weapons. So has Donald Trump won this war, and has he won the argument in the Middle East? Of course, the reason why it matters is because our holidays this summer, Ted Jeffrey, were under threat. That trip to Lanzarote or the United States or the Costa del Sol was seriously in peril because European airlines are running out of jet fuel. So it really matters. Plus, of course, we know that part of the reason why inflation has made a return is because of what's happened in the Middle East. So is a peace deal coming? We'll get to that very, very shortly. Meanwhile, the BBC is now using bailiffs. It's using debt collectors to get money out of cash-strapped Brits. So is it time to get rid of this hated TV tax? Meanwhile, unemployment hits a 10-year high. That's right, folks. We're being led by the party of working people who, it turns out, are out of work. Is this the worst government in 100 years? Reacting to the big stories of the day, I'm delighted to say with me in the studio, Rafe Hadelman-Coos, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Hello, Rafe.
Greetings.
And good afternoon to you. We've got so many big stories to get through and the Hamiltons waiting in the wings. But I'm very excited to say that Alex Phillips, big star here at Talk, is a wonderful traditionalist and she's a patriot and she likes to do a lot of the activities that make this country great. And I think you'll agree that at the very top of that list is cheese rolling. And so take a look at this.
I'm at the bottom of Cooper's Hill in Gloucester. This, of course, is where I grew up, and today is the annual cheese roll. Thousands of people are packed on the side of this really steep hill. It's a tradition that nobody really knows when it dates from. People say it could be a Roman tradition, people say it could be a pagan tradition. All I know is that for hundreds of years now, Maybank Holiday Monday, people come from all over the world to chase an actual wheel of double Gloucester down this incredibly steep hill. It continued happening during World War I, during World War II. The only difference then was they actually used a wooden cheese because of rationing. So far, there have been no reported deaths, but many injuries. The event, in theory, is actually illegal, but the people of Gloucester wouldn't allow that to be the case, and so the authorities have had to just allow people to keep assembling here. We've seen earlier on during the day the coming of the cheese, the entry of the cheese, with people wearing incredible sort of ornate animal heads and sort of pagan face paints and, you know, banging drums and shouting, cheese, cheese, cheese. And they've now walked round through this area at the bottom of the hill and will be making their way to the top of the hill. When at 12 o'clock the first race will happen, there is a man's race, there's a woman's race, there's children's race, and then there's also a race to go all the way back to the top.
Just brilliant stuff. I've got to say, a bit of an X-rated outfit there from Alex Phillips. As a married man, I did not know where to look. It's clearly quite hot where she is, but it's quite a moment, that. The cheese rolling. With me down the line, Britain's most famous political double act, Neil and Christine Hamilton. Good afternoon to both of you. Neil, have you ever chased a camembert?
Well, I have chased Alex Phillips. I used to work with her at one time.
Well, that's another story, and I believe we're waiting for the results of that tribunal. But it's a wonderful tradition, isn't it, Christine? The cheese rolling, one of those eccentric activities that make this country great.
Absolutely. I'm 100% in favour of all that sort of thing, however stupid. There's a thing that goes on in Wales called, is it bog snorkeling?
Yes, bog snorkeling.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. People snorkel through bogs every year. It always happens. Bogs and Morris dancing. I mean, I used to think Morris dancing was pretty stupid when I was a teenager, but now I absolutely love it. The sight of these middle-aged and elderly men going around with all their bits and bobs, sticks and flags. I think it's wonderful. It's great exercise. No, I love it. I'm all in favour of all these things. They're the stuff that makes Britain great. That's what we're all about. And if you don't like our traditions, then there's something wrong with you.
Well, Neil and Christine, you are both robustly conservative individuals. Neil, are you concerned about how fractured the political right are becoming in this country?
Well, it just shows how strong the right generally has become, isn't it? Because who would have expected this for having the Labour government that we've got? Which must be the worst government in living memory, and possibly going back even to Lord North, who lost the American colonies. But it is a shame that the vote is going to be split, but personalities are inseparable from politics, and Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe are like the two poles of a battery, and join them together and you get sparks. So I don't think that there's anything that can be done to coalesce, which is obviously the desirable thing, so that the Makerfield by-election would be won by Reform on current pollings, whereas with a Restore candidate as well, it won't be. And it would be truly delightful if Andy Burnham were not to win Makerfield, wouldn't it? Because that would plunge the Labour Party into an even bigger existential crisis than it's got now. More to the point, it would preserve Keir Starmer. I pray for that every night, because with Keir Starmer as leader, there is no recovery for Labour.
I tend to agree with you. Christine, many are irritated by the intervention of Rupert Lowe into right-wing politics, because all they see is a man who is going to dilute the Reform vote.
Well, I'm sorry if people feel like that. Rupert was a perfectly good member of Reform, and then Nigel, for some reason, took against him. Nigel has taken against people, many people over the years, who he thinks are getting a little bit too much publicity, a little bit too much liked by the general populace and the voters and the members, and he cuts them down. It's the tall poppy syndrome. He did it to Neil, he did it to Ben Habib, he did it to Rupert Lowe, he did it to Suzanne Evans. And I'm afraid with Rupert, this is what he's got. Rupert wasn't prepared to just go away. He's got a huge amount to offer, a huge amount to give. He's a very fine politician, and he puts his money where his mouth is. And it's entirely within Rupert's ability, whatever. He's perfectly entitled to stand. And Nigel should have thought about this before he kicked Rupert out of Reform. He might have thought, gosh, he might go and start his own party. He is a leader. Rupert is a leader. So we'll see. But I mean, if it means that we get Andy Burnham, then, obviously that's bad news, because as Neil said, what I want, and we're Conservatives with a small c, what we both want is Starmer to remain, because he's by far the best of the bunch for people like us. Can you imagine if Starmer goes, we don't want Burnham, we don't want Rayner, and God almighty, we don't want, what's his name, Miliband.
No, we definitely don't want Red Ed.
Long live Starmer! Long live Starmer!
Save Starmer! The project starts here. Paul is in Nottinghamshire. Neil and Christine. Paul, do you think that Farage mishandled his relationship with Rupert Lowe?
Completely. Absolutely. I think people need to stop blaming Rupert Lowe for splitting the vote if it happens. It's a local election. They're supposed to be voting for the people that think are going to do better for the area. The only people that they can blame if Andy Burnham does end up becoming the PM is the people that vote for Labour, not anybody else. Even if you've got 300 parties, the only people to blame is the ones that voted for him to get in.
And Paul, who gets your vote at the next election? Do you know yet?
Originally, I was thinking Farage, but then he keeps changing his mind with things, saying, yeah, I'm going to do this, then I'm not going to do this. It's like, right, okay. So at the moment, it's quite possibly going to be Rupert Lowe.
Oh, well, that's fascinating. Paul, thank you for a brilliant call. Have an excellent bank holiday Monday. With me live in the studio is Rafe Hadel-Mancu. Rafe, is it now the duty of all Conservatives to unite around Farage?
Yes, actually, your last caller was very interesting, because there is a class of voters which you find particularly in Restore and elsewhere that are called expressive voters. And they don't care. Well, look, many of the people in Restore I'm sympathetic with, and I respect them greatly. But there's also a faction that are so passionate about these issues, they just want to make their vote and they want their voice to be heard, identifying with a certain policies, which I understand. But they will do that even if it does mean splitting the vote, which I think is not in their own best interest in the future. So yes, we do have to unite the right. As I say, when the right is split, they become incapable of forming a government. You only need to have 31 to 32% of the vote to form a majority government today in this country. The reality is, with Restore's vote share hived off of Reform, it becomes very difficult for Reform to meet that threshold, and there is only approximately a 1/3 ceiling that Reform can get. We've always celebrated the rise of the Green Party recently because it splits the Labour vote. So by that same logic, we have to ensure we don't suffer the same split over here, and it means people may have to hold their noses and vote for a party they don't like. But if we can get the Tories down to single digits, or we can, because also the Tories have to think about this. Obviously, no one's going to stand their candidates down. So it's an appeal to voters to basically hold their noses and use tactical voting as they never have before to get behind the candidate they think is most likely to stop Burnham, because we know all the polling shows Starmer will beat Rayner, will beat Streeting, will beat Miliband, but will not beat Burnham. And Burnham, as Prime Minister, means Labour will become the biggest party in the country.
Neil, Christine talked about tall poppy syndrome, about Nigel Farage being intimidated by other popular figures in his party, implying that he's something of a diva, maybe an egomaniac. Do you have concerns about Farage's character?
Well, not really, but the tall poppy syndrome in his case was nothing to do with being intimidated. I don't think he's easily intimidatable. But I do think that he wants to be, as I've described it in the past, the bride at every wedding, corpse at every funeral, and the baby at every christening. So it's the competition that I think irks him. I don't really know. I mean, I've been very close with him and worked with him over many, many years. And I've seen the good side of Nigel and the flawed side, if I could put it that way. And think on balance, of course, he's very much a good thing. And he has transformed British politics much for the better, in my opinion. And I do agree with the fount of wisdom and common sense, Rafe Dadel-Mancoux, that we have to think tactically about using our votes to get the ultimate outcome which we prefer. It may not be 100% what we want, but if it's a very large proportion of what we want, then that's what we should vote for.
Briefly,
the next election should be, a great tactical voting opportunity for people on the right.
Briefly, Neil, would you back Farage as PM?
Yes, I would, if he was the one who was most likely to get rid of this Labour government. And although I'm an admirer of Kemi Badenoch, and I think she's done an amazing job, one of the most difficult jobs in British politics, being the leader of the opposition, but with the baggage that she carries, the history of her party, certainly in the last 14 years and probably in the last 30, I do think that that's an insuperable obstacle for her to surmount. So in the circumstances that we're now in, I do think Reform and Nigel Farage offer the best opportunity that we can see at the moment.
How interesting. What a considered response, and a significant response there from Neil Hamilton, who is noticeably warming to the Reform project, not without reservations. Meanwhile, the BBC are now bringing in bailiffs, debt collectors, to collect the licence fee, going after cash-strapped Brits to pay for this organisation. Rajit is in Harrow. Hello, Rajit. What's your view on this? We'll come to Rajit in just a moment. John's in Cambridgeshire. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
I should say afternoon. I've got to get used to this shift, haven't I? So we're going to come to the Hamiltons in just a moment, but the BBC are using debt collectors and bailiffs now. Do you watch the BBC?
I haven't paid my TV licence for over 3 years.
Wow.
I will continue to refuse to pay my TV licence. I think it's become a very biased political backdrop for certain governments, and what they preach is not what we should be, to some degree, what we should be hearing.
Now, of course, John, I would never condone breaking the law, not paying the licence fee while watching the BBC. You don't pay the licence fee, but do you break the rules by watching telly?
No, I only watch Prime.
Streaming.
Yeah, streaming. And I know recently, obviously, there's been rumour that we'd have to start playing our TV, the Netflix and Netflix will come under the BBC licence, which I think is wrong, because you're already paying a subscription for certain channels.
Yeah.
So how does the BBC benefit if they've got to pay all the Netflix and Prime? And
it makes no sense at all. John, briefly, if you can, what would you do with the BBC?
Either it goes commercial and has adverts, or we get rid of it totally. it should not be supported by taxpaying people.
I'm guessing that, like millions, you used to love the Beeb and don't anymore.
It used to be, until probably the beginning of this century, it used to be a really good, especially the World News and the BBC. And so the last 20 years, it has really gone downhill.
Well, there you go, John. Thank you for a brilliant call, and I'm very lucky and very privileged that you listen to and watch Talk instead, which of course costs you nout. Neil and Christine, let me ask you, John speaks for millions, doesn't he?
Absolutely, he does. I wish I could take such a principled stand and just say I'm never going to watch the BBC, so we're not going to pay the licence fee. But we do occasionally. I mean, it probably costs us. I mean, what is the licence fee now? I don't know.
160, 170 quid odd.
I know. It probably costs us at least £1 a minute, the amount of BBC that we watch in the year, possibly £2 a minute. But you know, we're law-abiding citizens, and so we do watch it very occasionally. So we do play. But no, I mean, it's daylight robbery. The BBC's days, as it is now, currently funded, must be numbered. It's utterly ludicrous. More and more people are turning away. They're just not worth the money. And the idea that they're going to well, they won't presumably put people in prison for not paying it, because they don't put rapists in prison, do they? So why would you put a licence dodger in prison? They're just
Good
spending
point.
more of that licence money pursuing these poor people who can't afford the licence. It's outrageous. They should have adverts in all the popular... I mean, what is it? Strictly Come Dancing. How many millions watch Strictly?
5 million.
5 million. Well, there you are. Stick a couple of adverts in the middle of Strictly and you have probably half the licence fee. It's a nonsense.
And I stand corrected, it's now £180 a year, which, Neil, is a colossal amount of cash.
Well, it is, and a television tax is wrong in principle, in my view. It might have been justifiable when it was started 100 years ago, because then there was only the BBC. And, of course, in those days, it was a truly impartial body as well. And the problem that we've got today is that its remit has had to expand as broadcasting has become, much more complicated and widespread in its offer to the public. But it's impossible to fund an organisation which covers all elements of entertainment through a tax. So it's impractical as well as immoral, because why should we be forced to pay for things that we don't watch? We actually watch very little on any mainstream television channel, not just the BBC. Most of the listings are wall-to-wall rubbish anyway.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather watch the rubbish I like that we can get on YouTube or wherever. We shouldn't have to pay for the stuff that we don't consume. So yes, you can see an argument for public service broadcasting, but most of what the BBC does is not public service broadcasting. And if all broadcasters had a public service remit for a portion of their output, then that would be, I think, perfectly justifiable. But I don't see why the taxpayer or the individual should pay a regressive tax, because this is not related in any way to income or ability to pay, to fund something that most people don't watch anymore.
Briefly, if you can, Christine, migrants scramble for British citizenship ahead of a tightening around the rules for indefinite leave to remain. More than 300,000 refugees, migrant workers and their dependents applied for citizenship in the year to March. Are we ever going to fix Britain's immigration nightmare?
No, not by the look of it, and not until somebody gets a grip of it with an iron fist. I mean, how many have come over this weekend already? 1,000 in the boat? I think it's nearly 1,000.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's like emptying a leaking ship with a sieve. I mean, it's crazy. And all the government seems to be able to do is publish these figures to say that net migration has gone down. Well, yes, it has, but the wrong people are leaving and the wrong people are arriving. Or should I say the right people are leaving, but they're wrong because they shouldn't be leaving. They're the sort of people that this country needs. Hope I've made myself clear. But of course they're scrambling. Of course they're scrambling. And, nothing seems to be done. People are refused leave to stay and then they just disappear into the system and goodness knows where they are.
Most definitely. Christine and Neil, so wonderful to see you. Do you have plans for the bank holiday weekend? I would eat my hat if you don't.
Well, darling, it's nearly over.
Yeah.
But surely you've saved your best till last. I will say that Neil doesn't look like he's peaked.
Of course I'm not peaked. I'm delighted to be on your show.
Honestly, I tell you, Mark, because we're wonderfully basically retired, it makes no difference to us whether it's a bank holiday, a Saturday, or Sunday. It doesn't matter. The days are just the days. So we're just having a fabulous time where what we're doing is enjoying this wonderful, warm, balmy evenings by entertaining friends for suppers when you can sit outside till midnight in your T-shirts.
And any gardening, Neil? Are you going to spend the afternoon on your knees?
I've been out in the garden and I've cleaned up specially for you.
I'm so pleased. Listen, it was so good to see you. Go and pour yourselves a large gin and tonic and we'll speak soon. My thanks to very good friends of Talk, good friends of mine, the one and only Neil and Christine Hamilton. Another dear friend is Rafe Hadelmanku, who I'm delighted to say is going to stay with us for the next few minutes. Of course, we're here until 1. And what about this for a story? Has Donald Trump just saved the great British holiday? More on that next.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks. That's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel.
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is a peace deal in the Middle East in the offing, with overnight reports that Donald Trump has hammered out a deal with the Iranian regime to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons? Who better to ask than Britain's favourite historian, Martin Whittock. Hello, Martin. Good afternoon.
Good morning. Oh, well, sorry. Good afternoon.
Well, I know I'm still
Bank Holiday Monday.
I'm the same. I'm recalibrating like crazy. Wonderful to see you. Are we in the mood to celebrate this news?
Well, the shape of the deal, as it appears at the moment, is offering Iran sanctions relief, unlocking of $20 billion of frozen assets. This in return for Iran reopening the Strait of Hormuz and agreeing to negotiate on its nuclear program over the next 60 days, starting on 5th of June in Pakistan. And the US is demanding the unfreezing of assets in Qatar, which apparently we think is about $6 billion of Iranian assets, be made conditional on progress on the handover of Iran's enriched uranium. And it reportedly also requires Iran and the USA and their allies to cease fighting and for Israel to end its offensive in Lebanon. So if this succeeds, there are definitely some positives. If it ends the Iranian nuclear program and Iran gives up current stocks of enriched uranium, if it opens the Strait of Hormuz, and clearly the war has severely damaged the Iranian regime and its proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon. But there are some negatives here as well, of course, because in many ways we're sort of back to the nuclear negotiations taking place at the start of the war. And in this key area, the question must be, what's the war achieved after many civilian deaths, economic impact, and how much this is better than the Obama 2015 deal, which did lead to reduction in enriched uranium that Trump frequently derides. But now we seem to be emerging something that's a bit similar to that. Israel won't be happy at restrictions on its actions, and it's also revealed the asymmetrical nature of war between a superpower and an ideologically entrenched weaker regime. Made the US look like a destabilizing ally? China benefits from that. Russia's benefited from rising oil prices. The Iranian regime is entrenched as much as ever. then that's why many Republican hawks in the USA are not happy. So clearly, there could be some real positives out of this, but it has to be asked, what has the actual war in itself achieved that couldn't have been achieved by hard negotiation a couple of months ago? And finally, it will be months until shipping supply chains are back to pre-war levels, even if there's a deal this week. And so I don't want to rain on the parade, but clearly there are positives, but there are real questions as well, Mark.
And the problem now, do you fear that Iran could weaponize the Strait of Hormuz for the foreseeable future?
I think that's the danger. I mean, clearly that's always been in the mix. It's a very, very powerful option for the Iranians. But I think in many ways, more than ever before, this current situation has revealed to them just how powerful that is, but also how vulnerable Gulf allies of the US are to attacks on their energy infrastructure, as well as the movement of things like oil, natural gas, and fertilizers as well. So that is another unexpected, well, perhaps we should have expected it, but certainly an unintended outcome of this war, that the Iranian regime, still very entrenched, but weaker, of course, but still very entrenched, and clearly now realizes just the power of even the threat. That's the thing, you see, just threatening action in the in the Strait of Hormuz, will mean that ships don't go through there because of the huge insurance premium. So they don't even actually have to strike at anything. They just have to say they might or they will, and ships will then be going right the way around the African continent to avoid this, which of course puts huge amount of price on products, because the insurance leaps once there's a threat of war in the area, even without action, military action.
Of course, Rafe Hadelwanku is with me in the studio. And Rafe, it's difficult to appraise this war, isn't it? And listening to Martin, it's a 50-50 really. Yes, Iran has been weakened militarily, but now they've familiarised themselves with their ability to weaponise the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think that this decision to go into Iran by the Americans and the Israelis was an historic mistake?
Yes, well, like Martin, I'm also an historian, and I've said for a long time that America going into Iraq and Afghanistan was equivalent of Britain in the Boer War. The Boer War exposed to the world that the greatest power in the world, Britain, wasn't actually infallible. And the same thing happened with Iraq and Afghanistan, and everything else since then has shown America's continued decline. And the decision to go into Iran has merely accentuated America's decline. Yes, you could say it's a victory because essentially they've got a nuclear deal perhaps on the cards.
They got rid of the Navy and the Air Force is gone.
Open up the Strait of Hormuz, but the regime is still there. We were promised regime change. And of course, we have still got no deal. There'll probably be no deal at all on ballistic programs and on the proxies. The proxies are still going to basically be able to be controlled by Iran, and you've got the economic lifeline going out there. So yes, there's no prolonged war, the straits are opened, but neither side can claim a victory. Remember, Trump was really calling for unconditional surrender. At the end of the day, this was a huge embarrassment. The great test is, would he have gone in now knowing what he knew if he hadn't? And the reality is he would never have gone in if he had known how things would be, just as Putin would never have gone into the Ukraine war.
Martin, briefly, if you can, do you think Donald Trump regrets this war?
I think so. I think Rafe's absolutely right. I think if Trump had any idea it was going to pan out the way it has done, he would not go in. I think he expected a very quick victory, decapitating the regime change, and then some kind of, unconditional surrender. It clearly has not taken into account what an apocalyptic ideological regime the Iranians are. But we all knew that, and how entrenched they are. This must be taken into account. That doesn't mean to say you give in to these regimes, but it means to say you need to work out just how resilient they are before you take military action, because they don't just crumble at first strike.
Martin, a deep pleasure and privilege to have you on the show. Britain's favourite historian, Martin Whittock, with a fascinating overview. It does look like a peace deal is on the way. It does look like our inflationary misery at the petrol pumps may come to an end. We might get that holiday overseas, but both Rafe and Martin argue a very high price has been paid. Richard is in North London. How are you, Richard? Oh, forgive me, I've got a bit carried away. You see, I move at such a rate of knots, Rafe. You've no idea. I'm like Lewis Hamilton on this show, metaphorically. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get to your calls next. And I'm delighted to say one of the most high-profile entrepreneurs in the country, Charlie Mullins, joins us to react to the news that Nigel Farage wants to end income tax on overtime. Big Charlie Mullins is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. I've got the privilege of 1 till 4 all of this week in for Ian Collins, so do join me tomorrow at 1 if you can. Back for weekend breakfast, as always, at the weekend. How are we going to fix our broken politics? What is the future for the country? Richard is in London. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Mark. Good to talk to you again.
You too. What do you think's going on here?
As you remember, a few weeks ago, I rang up and suggested that we approached welfare reform by really a break with Labour's 1945 welfare state consensus and moving towards a sort of what you could call a pay-as-you-go. Effectively, the idea being that you wouldn't have the El Dorado or the sort of la-la land pull of the gigantic welfare state we have at the moment. Rather, people would pay into an account, and that would guarantee basic and temporary health care and temporary unemployment benefit care, similar to the original Lord George welfare state.
Well, I think this is a good idea. What you're saying, Richard, is no more blank cheque.
Well, and the thing is, Mark, the fundamental thing. I mean, the chap you had, the chap who looks a bit like Max Clifford. The chap with sort of white hair earlier. He was saying stuff like Shabana's done some good work, different to her predecessor. I mean, that's not really true. I mean, Shabana's got rid of the Rwanda thing, and I think we just have to acknowledge something. The left and the Labour Party have been trying to create a different country for about 80 years now. It's characterised by two things: much bigger involvement of the state in our lives. Started with nationalisation, unions. Now we have this massive welfare state. And secondly, Mark, it's the idea of the multicultural society. Again, so something else.
And the multicultural society is a socialist ideology.
Yes, and it's happened throughout Europe. And I think what gets missed is that there's two Fs for
Where's this going, Rich? Fabians?
It's going to be completely okay. It's the Fabianism in Britain, and it's the Frankfurt School on the continent. These essentially are Trojan horses for the left marching through the institutions. So the Fabians in Britain essentially took over the Labour Party, which started as a fairly soft, cuddly thing about
working class voters, the unions, a fair pay for a fair day's work.
Yes, but before you know where you are, that they started using the language of Trotsky. Even in the early '60s, anybody who challenged mass immigration was labelled by someone like Hugh Gaitskell, who was supposed to be a centrist. Hugh Gaitskell called anybody who criticised mass immigration at the time a racist. Now that's a trick out of Trotsky's book, and it gives the game away. The Labour Party was being taken over by people with essentially a Marxist headset. The same thing happened in Europe. I mean, Mark, imagine a politician in China or Japan saying, we want to make China or Japan multicultural. They wouldn't last 5 minutes.
Good luck with that. Richard, I could listen to you all day. What a fantastic, knowledgeable man you are, and really enjoyed that conversation. Call me again soon. Let's pick up that chat. You're totally right. I think that the left have completely lost the plot. I think 8 decades is not an exaggeration. Look at the state of the country in the 70s with the unions out of control. And here we go again. Thank you for that. Nigel Farage has announced that if he becomes Prime Minister, he will get rid of income tax on overtime. Let's get reaction from one of the country's most high-profile entrepreneurs, Charlie Mullins, chairman of We Fix London and founder of Pimlico Plumbers. Hello, Charlie. Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi, Jonathan. Hi.
Really good to have you back on the show. Can I ask for your reaction to this policy from Farage to remove income tax from people working overtime?
A brilliant idea, probably the best idea I've probably heard in politics in the last 30 years. I think that will encourage many people to work. It will encourage people that don't work into the workplace. It's a brilliant idea. A lot of people don't want to work because of the tax, which is a living, because I think we're being taxed about 10 times a day on everything. You know, petrol, food, you know, on the roads, we're paying for the roads. So to cut down on tax is the best way to get people back into work, undoubtedly on that.
And Charlie, do you have employees at We Fix London who work overtime?
Oh, yeah, of course. We're 24-hour. The fact that they get good money is good enough to bring them in. But, of course, it will bring in more people if they're not paying tax on their earnings, which I totally think is unfair because of, we all know where the tax goes, all goes on lazy people that don't work.
Most definitely. And it's really tough, isn't it, when your employees have reached their contracted hours, when they go into overtime, you know, this could be a 12-hour day. It's back-breaking work. They shouldn't be taxed on that.
That's right. Well, I'm going to say it's back-breaking work. I mean, they come up with this idea like that the Gen Z are the highest burnout people. They're also the laziest people out there, but they reckon they're the most burnt out people. They don't do nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all nonsense, really. I mean, if they had to work to survive, they would go to work. The problem we have is we're giving money to people for doing nothing. And whenever you do that, people won't go to work. But we don't have a problem at We Fix. Everybody comes to work. There's not enough hours in the day. We work 24 hours a day and very proud of it.
And overtime is an important part of that business model. And for the boys and girls that work for you, quite often the overtime is that critical amount of money that allows them to pay down the debt, save up for a car, maybe a deposit or the annual holiday, right?
Yeah, look, well, if you want to have a better life, you need to go to work and do more hours. I mean, the old company that I had, Pimlico Plumbers, they've stopped their late night work, so because they can't handle the situation with us now, and you know they're doing themselves more harm than good because engineers are coming to us saying, look, we want overtime, we want more money, we're used to more money. So to do away with you know, not doing overtime or taxing you on overtime is so wrong. But believe me, what Reform are doing, they're getting more and more voters behind them. Remember, we're 3 years away from the election, and the way Reform are performing, then with a move like this, they're definitely getting into number 10.
Well, that's very interesting. We'll come to that, Charlie. Do you worry that this policy could be exploited by companies? Could they fix the system a little bit? Could there be corruption based upon this new policy?
Well, I suppose you always got someone can have a little fiddle up and have a mess about, but anybody with half a brain, you know, if you've earned £20 an hour, you want £20 an hour, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't allow anybody to start taking money off you that shouldn't do. But I think more and more employees will encourage it, and it just be a known thing. I mean, to go to work and not have to pay tax, it's like a dream, isn't it? Nobody would leave the UK. Unfortunately, you know, there'll be many people that would suffer, and the right people, you know, that have disabilities or can't go to work, I feel, you know, sorry for them, and they should be helped more. But the majority of them that are on the dole, probably over 50%, are just Ponzi's, and taxpayers are paying for them.
Charlie, you are one of the country's most high-profile and successful entrepreneurs. You founded Pimlico Plumbers, which was a great success, and now We Fix London, which is growing exponentially. Were you flattered by Reform UK's decision to choose a highly respected local plumber to run the by-election campaign in Makerfield?
Yeah, great idea. I've spoken to the chap. He's the first plumber to do it. And I wish him all the good luck in the world. We need more business people in it. So another great move. You know, Nigel Farage is going to get more and more business people into politics. And hopefully I'll be one of them, helping out with getting youngsters into work. That's what we need. We don't need career politicians. We don't need the busybodies. We don't need the nonsense, the paedophiles. We don't need all them pests. We need proper people in business. And as soon as you get business people in business, it will work.
Robert Kenyon, of course, is the respected local plumber who is Makerfield born and bred. And, of course, that's how you started your career, Charlie, leaving school quite young and training as a plumber. The rest is history. And this by-election, well, it's going to be tight, isn't it? Do you think Reform can win?
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. I mean, you know, everybody loves a plumber. So, undoubtedly.
Well, definitely. And, Charlie, reading between the lines of your previous answer, are you suggesting you could have a role in a in a future Reform UK government? Would you serve under Nigel Farage in some capacity?
Undoubtedly. I mean, we're 3 years away. I'm making plans for that, providing I'm not brown bread, of course.
Well, I've got to say, you look very healthy, Charlie. I mean, can I ask you, if I'm not speaking out of school here, would you consider running for Parliament as an MP, or do you see yourself more as an advisor to a Reform government?
I think I'll give the both for Bash, because, you know,
wow.
if you go in for two and you wind up with one, how bad's that? You know what I mean?
Well, listen, that is breaking news at 12:43 in the afternoon. Charlie Mullins, who, let's be very clear about this, is an OBE. Charlie Mullins, OBE, one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the country, has said that he's willing to run for Parliament at the next election. And Charlie, what about the economy at the moment? What's your view of Rachel Reeves and her policies?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, she's complete rubbish. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's brought this sort of, what would you call it, near enough. You know, we're in a recession. She's brought it on herself by being stupid. You know, she hasn't got a clue about accounts. She hasn't, irrespective of she's gone to some college or something to learn it. She's got no idea whatsoever. I mean, I wouldn't even trust her to go out shopping on her own.
Wow. I mean, would you employ Rachel Reeves in a business of yours?
No, no. The answer is no. I wouldn't let her in for an interview. She's just not the right material. I mean, look, probably most of the cabinet are not the right material because they've not been in a proper job. So I wouldn't employ anyone from Labour, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, they're doing a great job of messing up the UK, and they're doing a great job of losing themselves so they won't be in power in 3 years' time. They're absolutely doing a marvellous job. And Nigel Farage is benefiting on that. I mean, you know, he's so far ahead at the moment. And when the election comes, I believe that he'll play some very clever moves, and we'll vote him in for sure.
Briefly, Charlie, really quick, because we know you're a busy man. Are you worried that the political right are split? Are you worried about the Tories competing with Reform and cancelling each other out?
Well, of course, there's that problem there. I mean, the crafty so-and-so, isn't they? You have got that problem there, but I don't...
Well, at that moment, we lost the brilliant Charlie Mullins, but what a great interview it was. I think you'll agree. Very compelling. Charlie Mullins, OBE. Hard to disagree, briefly, Rafe, with what Charlie had to say.
Yeah, right on the money as well. And maybe he could hire Rachel as a cleaner or something like that. She probably got that ability to do, though she probably will make a mess of that quite literally as well, as she has with our economy.
That's it. But Charlie is a self-made man. He's come from nothing, built a business. He lives in the real world. And someone like Charlie and this establishment, you know, the government, they're so separate now, aren't they?
But this is so crucial because, you know, we've said several times here, and some of your guests have, that, of course, there's nobody on the front bench of the Labour Party has any business experience, has any idea how to actually run a government business. But then you think, is this just due to incompetence? Is it because only they haven't run a business that they're running the economy into the ground? Because surely they could seek advice if they wanted to. Surely they do watch programmes or people like Charlie speak and point out how disastrous raising national insurance and other things have been. And so therefore you can only have the conclusion that they are deliberately putting far-left ideology ahead of Britain's national interest. Remember, these are the people who wanted to give away the Chagos Islands, not for any advantage to Britain, but because it was an ideological far-left thing to do. So people that can do that are the same people, I think, who could quite happily mismanage the economy or make the wrong decisions because it's the emotional thing to do. It feels like it's the best thing to do, not to grant zero-hour contracts, to essentially, you know, do everything that they've done recently.
Minimum wage, which has caused youth unemployment.
Put the minimum wage up, lift the benefit on the two-child benefit cap. All of these things are economically damaging, but they seem like the sorts of things people on the left should do.
Talk star Alex Phillips is rolling cheese in the countryside in a very, what can I say, compromising outfit. That's next.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. Lovely to have your company. It is 12:49. And I've got to say that Talk star Alex Phillips has made quite a splash in the countryside. She's been rolling cheese and she joins us now live on location. Alex, where are you?
This is basically where I was born and bred. I actually broke my arm on this hill. But I've been at the annual Gloucester Coopers Hill Cheese Roll. It's a celebration that people don't know where it came from. Is it from Roman times? Is it from pagan times? But basically every single year, it's an extremely steep hill. People fly from all around the world to chase down basically a vertical drop after a wheel of double Gloucester. And yeah, it's been an amazing day. You can see the crowds behind me here. During the advert break, actually, I just got ambushed by a load of sheep. They were like practically jumping over me. But there's just thousands of people here. There's lots of strange pagan rituals, Morris dancing. It's incredible. A German won the race, but Italians were there. People from South Africa, people from Japan. The Italian guy had actually flown in last night, did the cheese on, he's heading straight to the airport to go home.
Just spectacular. Well, you've met and interviewed the winner, who is a German called Tom Kopke. Let's take a listen to that chat.
Tom, any advice to people considering cheese rolling now that you're the champion?
We gotta commit all the way. There's no half-assing. Send it, full send.
What training did you do? What's involved to make your body tough enough to survive?
I do a lot of ultra running, so trails, keep your ankles nice and loose. That's about it. It's more about the mental part than the physical part.
Where have you travelled from today, and tell us a bit about the journey getting here? You've come from Germany, haven't you?
I'm from Germany. I came in from South Africa. So before this, I was in the bush with the lions. So overcome your fear and then you come here.
What's scarier, lions or cheese?
This is way scarier than lions.
Really?
Look, I'm telling you, standing up there and looking down that drop, it gets you.
And what's going through your mind when you're going down the hill?
Not much. You're just so locked in, and then you send it. It starts and then it goes.
So we'll see you again?
We'll see. All will be revealed in due time.
And what are you going to do with the cheese?
Share it with every one of the other competitors. That's like a tradition we have. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Just brilliant stuff. Alex, cheese rolling is notoriously competitive and cutthroat. Is there any evidence of doping?
Oh, do you know what? I think basically this is the evidence of doping. The local rugby team actually stand at the bottom of the hill, ready to rugby tackle people to sort of, stop their inertia, stop them smashing through the gates at the bottom. There's just a few bales of hay. And they were all sitting there with their cans of cider, some of them smoking cigarettes. This event is actually technically illegal, but the people of Gloucester just wouldn't have it. They come back every single year, and the Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust had to just say, do you know what? It's going to happen. We can't stop it. There are signs up everywhere saying you're here at your own risk.
Well, Alex, I know it's a warm day, but apparently the locals are going to have a whip round and get you some clothes.
On with my cider pouch.
I don't know where to look. I'm a married man. I mean, this is a family show. I believe that YouTube have already taken us off.
Oh, come on. Honestly, I think I'm actually overdressed compared to other people.
Can I say you look absolutely stunning as always. Alex, it's so much fun this, isn't it? And just one of those ridiculous British traditions, which is why we love this country.
It really is. And it's things like this, this is our heritage. And what's so beautiful for me, as a Gloucester girl, coming back here is seeing all the people from all around the world. You had film crews from all around the world, people flying in, like I said, to take part. It's one of these events that's just beamed out internationally. I actually met a Californian couple, and they're taking their kids around a load of niche sporting events. And I think this is their 8th out of 12 that they've done. And the guy from the Guinness World Records was here. It's a really amazing, weird day, which is kind of what a lot of rural England is all about.
Well, it's magic, as are you. Listen, Alex, we love your show at the weekend. You're tearing up trees at the moment. Everyone loves the show. Cannot wait to have you back on air here at Talk. Enjoy your cider and enjoy your camembert, and we'll catch up soon. My thanks to Talk superstar Alex Phillips. Great fun. Dennis is in Nottinghamshire. Dennis, we're being told that Andy Burnham is the king of the North. Is that true?
Well, as you see on TV, all we hear or see is not the Andy Burnham when you go into the main square in Manchester. It's full of drugs, social misbehaviour, drunks, locals mistreated by them. Are the people of Makerfield blind for this? I suppose if Burnham does get us the MP, he will then become not known to Makerfield because he won't be there.
No.
Abroad most of the time, and my mind is made up by saying, Markfield, wake up. We all need a plumber sometimes, and yours is right now. Vote for him.
Dennis, thank you for that. We'll speak soon. Brilliant call. Enjoy your Monday. Lorraine's in Chelmsford. Good afternoon, Lorraine.
Oh, good afternoon, Mark.
Lovely to have you. Listen, it looks like Rupert Lowe and Restore could stop Reform from winning this by-election. What's your view?
Absolutely horrific. And what really annoys me, though, more than anything, Mark, is I think it's actually a Tory proxy. I'll be honest. I would also like to say that Rupert Lowe does not run his own Twitter account. It is run by a chap called Alistair Harrison, and even that was actually acknowledged by Ben Habib after his comment that he was the only one that turned up at the rally last weekend.
So you're not having Rupert. You don't buy it. You're not a fan, Lorraine.
I'm not a fan, and I also would like to say about Elon Musk pushing through the algorithms, because all I've got on my timeline is restore, restore, restore. I believe that Rupert Lowe has companies in net zero, and I wonder if it's not some sort of agreement there.
Well, of course, now, Lorraine, as you will be well aware, Rupert Lowe is not here to defend himself. He will likely deny such links or allegations, but you're entitled to your view. What about Nigel then, briefly, Lorraine? Is he the real deal, or is he a bit of a diva? Do you worry about Nigel?
Not at all. To me, Nigel has fought for the last 35 years. He's put everything on the line. He got us out the EU. And that's another thing. I get people say that, Nigel's a Tory. Well, Nigel left the Conservative Party 35 years ago, I believe, to get us out of the EU.
And of course, 10 years ago, Lorraine, he was there in Dover talking about the boat crossings, and he's been proved right. Lorraine, I really enjoyed your call. Please call me again soon. Thanks for all the calls, texts and messages, the voice notes as well. My brilliant team, Ted and the gang, Jana, of course, the fantastic Kieran and Mark on the buttons, and Rafe Hadelman, who thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You're probably off now to have a slimline gin and tonic, aren't you?
Maybe some Pimm's as it's bank holiday.
Ooh, I think you've earned it. Petri Hoskins is here, and Petri, it's so nice to see you. You're normally on in the evening, and what a rare bank holiday treat to have you on during the day.
Treat to come in during the day and the daylight. I'm a bit like a vampire, though. I'm a bit like, oh, keep away from me. But it's lovely to see you. We both got the memo.
Yeah, we did, about the white clothing.
Memo.
It was bright and sunny.
All three of us, actually.
And actually, it is a bank holiday. We do want to have a bit of fun as well, don't we?
We do. But there are some stories we're going to talk about. One of them, actually, I'm fascinated by this, is the enhanced games. Have you seen this?
Yes. Amazing story.
I've always said that there should be the two, but now I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, well, perhaps not. But
no, I think we should. You know, Rafe's on something today.
Is he?
Yeah.
What's enhanced games?
Games. It's like the Olympics on steroids.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not on steroids, definitely.
Rafe is on the keto diet, and did you know that his body's a temple? He's lost 5 stone. Doesn't he look fantastic?
I'm very careless, very careless, but yes. Thank you very much.
But no, I think they would be very entertaining, the enhanced games.
Yeah.